Welcome to the Overload Podcast. This episode's topic, multiplayer weapon balance.
How long are we trying to make this?
I'd like to keep this under 2 hours if possible.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Good.
So about like 5 to 10 minutes per weapon. That's the rough idea.
Word up.
But yeah, okay. So, shall we get started?
Yeah, let's go.
All right. So let's start off with the first weapon, Impulse. So Impulse is basically has pretty much the highest raw DPS as far as the numbers go. So if you everything hits, it deals the most damage. So another good thing about it is it has consistent projectile spread. So as it flies, it doesn't actually spread. It also has slow projectiles, which can be really quite good for pre-fires and sort of suppressing different areas. And it has full automatic fire, which means you hold down mouse 1, bullets keep coming out, and it's in that sense it's quite straightforward to use. It's also very energy efficient. So those are kind of the main pros that come to mind immediately. And then two cons is obviously the slow projectiles can also be a curse and a blessing. So I would say in dogfights, it's really not as good as some of the other weapons that have faster projectiles. But in sort of tight areas where you can't really dogfight properly, I would say Impulse is a weapon that really excels in those areas. So it kind of has pretty distinct strengths and weaknesses. So yeah, what do you guys think? Like, do you think it's a very good weapon? Do you think it's kind of Where would you say it stands roughly?
Well, I think it stands pretty well on compared to all the other weapons. Like, to go back to that experiment where I put down a tier maker rank. No, a link.
Yes.
In the OTL Discord, a lot of people ranked both the Crusher and Impulse equal power, which I definitely agree with. Yeah, the Crusher is good at a close range, really good actually, for 3-hit kills, but the Impulse is a lot more consistent with DPS and all that stuff.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. What about you, Chili? Because I'm immediately getting some thoughts. I'm actually gonna real quickly make a few notes. But go on.
Impulse to me, I think, is one of the few weapons in this game that are close analogs to their D1 counterparts in form and function. Obviously, the Q4s from Descent and the Q6s from D2 is what they're after. They're great for flooding. The slow travel time is obnoxious. I hate them. I have personally always had a lot of trouble handling Impulse in a multiplayer environment.
Okay.
Something about the way that it floods in Overload I just can't get a handle on, and that might be a function of how fast they travel, because they seem to be a little bit faster than Descent and Descent 2. But also the asset is a little bit misleading, I feel like. They don't appear to take up much vertical space, but they can really fill up hallways quickly if you let them.
They take up deceptively large amount of space, right?
Yeah, and some of the mental strategy that I have to counter Q4s in D1, just essentially slowing time down and looking at where every individual shot is in space and reacting to that. Because the Impulse functions so similarly to those weapons, I expect to be able to do that in Overload, and I cannot. Maybe that's just how Overload's multiplayer works, but I cannot handle Impulse when it's being fired at me. I have a lot of trouble with that. Competent Impulse pilots, I have a lot of trouble with handling them. Firex comes to mind immediately. I can't do it. I can't shoot the Impulse worth a damn, and I die to it very frequently.
So So this is some okay. I figured I'd throw in a couple of ideas. So one of the things I would say about Impulse is when compared to Crusher or even Driller, I don't think that. I think there are situations where Impulse is better, but I think the problem with the two hit scan weapons in particular is that, and this is the reason why I kind of disagree with the tier list. I think Impulse is always slightly under those two weapons because ultimately what I found that you can do is you can retreat from Impulse users. I mean, if you're running away, good luck hitting a person that's either boosting away or just try-cording away from you with Impulse. I mean, they're going to get around that corner really quickly. Yeah. And what you can basically do is you can back off from an Impulse user, pelt them in the face with a hit scan, and they're basically forced to switch. Funnily enough, it was actually a game with Firex. And, he was playing it honorable in the start, pulling out the Impulse. It was a 1v1 game. And I, like a dirty bastard, I just went at him with a Driller. Peeked the corner, shot a few shots, and he couldn't retaliate with the Impulse, Next life, he switched a Driller, and it was a Driller versus Driller battle. So this is kind of why I think Impulse, at least in a 1v1 setting, is kind of slightly weaker. I do think in Team Anarchy, you oftentimes run into scenarios where you basically come up on people and you can basically get free shots off. And this sort of general Impulse spam, like you said, it fills up a lot of area. I think it's particularly true in Team Anarchy where, if two players are spamming the same tunnel, that's pretty much it. Like this area is completely unusable now. But yeah, overall, I would say the hit scan is it's not necessarily better in all scenarios, but I think there is a very distinct counterplay against Impulse, which it doesn't nullify the weapon completely, but it really works very well against it. And yeah, I think generally retreating from it just makes it so much weaker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I think a lot of pilots have trouble retreating in Overload, and maybe that's just because of their flying style, and maybe that's just because of their how they play video games. But if you have trouble retreating in Overload, you are going to think the Impulse is overpowered.
I have actually an idea about why retreating is so seldom really done in Overload, and I think it's because I think there's a very simple reason. So in Team Anarchy, let's say it's a 2v2, right? Two players get in a fight. They're exchanging fire. One of them wins, but intel has been given to the rest of the teams that this guy's lit up, right? Let's say we're fighting, right? You and Revstro have a team fight. Revstro kills you, but you hit him a bunch of times. I now have intel that Revstro is low. What am I going to do? Of course, I'm going to kind of beeline it towards him, trying to finish him off. And I think this is the thing where it's it often feels like playing aggressive is kind of the optimal thing to do because you know somebody's low, so might as well go finish him off and exchange the point real quick and easy. And I think that's kind of feeds into this sort of generally aggressive play style.
Yeah, and it's also a time to kill thing. With such a short time to kill, the more guns you have pointed at you, even if they're at one shield, the more danger you're in. I mean, it's multiplicative rather than just simple addition.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Sorry, Revstro, I thought you were going to say something there. I think I might have cut you off.
No, I wasn't going to say anything.
Oh, okay. But yeah, that's basically where I think it is. But I'm actually curious to hear. Where would you say on a 10-point scale, Revstro? Where would you say Impulse kind of lands?
I'm gonna say 7 or 8 out of 10.
So should I put it down as 7.5?
Well, I don't really like decimal scores. I like the
cool.
I don't know. I'm stuck between the two.
You can change it later if you want to. We can we can do all the weapons and we can go over it later if you'd like to. But is it okay if I put it down as 7? Or not?
Yeah, that's good.
All right, sure. What about you, Chili? What do you think it roughly is?
That is a solid 8.
All right, 8 out of 10.
I think it's an excellent performer in many situations, just due to the potential DPS that it has. And it's just a solid all-rounder weapon that's easy to understand for newbies, but it does have some topographical challenges, shall we say. Like, you're not going to be owning huge dog rooms with the Impulse, but you know, in a level like Junebug, where it's, you know, tight hallways that are somewhat short, you're going to be able to put a lot of damage out in all the right spots very quickly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree. That makes perfect sense to me. I'm kind of the same boat with Revstro. I would also put it as a 7 out of 10. I think it definitely has its moments where it's very powerful. I think ultimately, because the projectiles are quite slow, I think it's more of a defensive weapon. It's very powerful for kind of defending areas, you know, suppressing multiple tunnels, because you can just like fire one projectile in one tunnel, fire another in the other tunnel, and then kind of alternate between the two and effectively suppress two separate tunnels. So I think it has like these defensive sort of pre-fire potential, and that's kind of where the weapon shines. So yeah, I would say it's a 7 out of 10. I think there's definite counterplay to it, and there are weapons that, under certain circumstances, I would say outperform it pretty clearly. But I think I agree. I think it's a solid weapon, and I think it's pretty good. All right, so let's see. Now we're getting to a spicy one. Do you have any more closing thoughts on Impulse?
Nope.
All right. Okay, so now we're gonna get to a more shall we say controversial weapon. So Cyclone.
Aha.
Yeah.
Chili cannon.
Yeah. I'm actually, you know what? I'll let you guys go first about Cyclone. What do you guys think about Cyclone? Let's have Chili first. You're the Cyclone guy.
yeah. I guess I'll step up to the plate on this one. I actually don't like Cyclone. I use.
Wow, that's surprising.
Yeah. I never really enjoyed it in challenge mode, which is sort of what I contextualize a lot of the weapons in this game around, or at least did, you know, when multiplayer first started coming out. I saw it as super inaccurate, low damage, just couldn't do anything. But as the multiplayer beta went on and on and on, and then into release and through release, Cyclone was a consistent performer that was not getting major buffs nor nerfs through the patch cycles that the multiplayer beta was seeing and release was seeing. So I was able to sort of adopt that just because it was so consistent. Like I could sort of expect that there weren't going to be too many major changes to its damage profile, to the firing speed, you know, anything like that. So that sort of made it easy to learn, and because of just overload multiplayer, shall we say, you know, ping issues, desync issues, just general fuckery. I don't know if we were trying to keep this family firm.
No, it's pretty much anything
not
goes.
Anymore. General fuckery, we'll say.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, it countered a lot of the issues in the mechanics of the multiplayer for Overload. And I mean, yeah, okay, it wiped a lot of that away, and what does that say about my skill? But at the same time, there are some distinct limitations to the Cyclone. You're not hitting shit at very long ranges, or even long ranges. It does have a travel time, even if that travel time is very quick. It is bright, it is loud, and it doesn't do too much damage if you're only hitting them with one bolt at a time. I think it's somewhere in the ballpark of 3.6, something like that, 3.8 maybe. I think it's 3.6.
I think it's actually 3.3. I want to say, but yeah, it is in that ballpark. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So, there's also the mechanic of it literally losing its entire spin up if you let off the trigger for even a microsecond. Like, a frame can completely destroy a dogfight for you.
Mm-hmm.
So you lose out on boost if you're using it a lot. So there are some mechanical challenges to it that are not present in other weapons, shall we say. Is it a good weapon? Yes, it's great. I can't stand its relative inaccuracy compared to, you know, something like a Driller, a Cyclone, or not a Cyclone, a Crusher. it doesn't shoot straight. And I never used it much in challenge mode, so it was a bit of a challenge in and of itself to learn to use the Cyclone. And now when I go into challenge mode, I'm trying to use Cyclone F, and I can't. I love Cyclone F. That's actually pretty good. But I just something about it is, it's the only I can only make it work in multiplayer.
Fair enough.
I still don't really like it very much, but it's just something that works for me and has worked for me the entire time multiplayer's been out. So yeah, it's annoying to get shot at with, but just don't be there. Like that's yeah, you can see it coming. Yeah.
Okay.
That's my those are my preliminary thoughts on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought there were some pretty good thoughts there. Sure. Revstro, would you like to go next?
Okay, yeah. About the Cyclone, let me just say that I think it's a solid weapon, just like the Impulse, but there are a few shortcomings, like Chili said. Like, the startup is pretty obnoxious, in my opinion. And compared to a lot of the other weapons that see a lot of use, I think a Cyclone is on the lower end.
In terms of what, like
relative power level?
Using it,
or...
Yeah, relative power level.
Oh, okay.
But Cyclone, I think where it shines is basically just chipping away at damage on enemies and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily trying to kill them, just try to get them low enough so your teammates can just come and finish them off.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I don't want to necessarily say it's a low skill weapon, because it does take skill to actually use the Cyclone. Which, speaking of which, I don't agree with Birdseye saying that it's a brain dead weapon.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we've had our first call out. We've had our first player call out.
There we go. I was trying to avoid being the guy that does it, and I pulled it off. No, but yeah, absolutely, yeah, sure.
No, that's not I'm not saying that as in to be an asshole. Just I'm just saying in general, I don't think it's a noob weapon.
Revstro, 1 second. Birdseye, if you're listening, he's not trying to be an asshole. All right, go on. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, but I totally get it. Yes, I think it's I think it's perfectly fine to disagree. Yeah, go on.
But yeah, I also want to say that I think Cyclone also relies heavily on missile usage, because Cyclone just by itself I don't think is enough to actually be viable in a competitive sense.
Mm-hmm.
Early on in the league, Chili would often use the Cyclone along with the missile pods, and that was a really good combo at that time.
Yep, because you could disguise one inside the other.
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not very clearly visible because of the visual clutter that Cyclone creates, right? That makes sense, yes.
I kind of see Cyclone as filling somewhat, just in terms of combat role, sort of the opposite role of Impulse. Impulse, you're holding down hallways, you're, shooting straight lines.
I mean,
Cyclone, you're filling the space. And it's a little more visually cluttering than Impulse is, because it's not bright blue lines. It's a whole shower of yellow all over the walls, all over everything. Yeah,
it's kind of like a stream almost.
Yeah. So you're able to capitalize on large rooms much more effectively. And if you look at a lot of the popular levels that we have and have been playing, there aren't that many flat hallways for the Impulse to work particularly well in, which makes it seem as if the Impulse is potentially higher skill. I'm not saying that the Cyclone is a particularly high skill weapon, but there are some high skill mechanics to it, shall we say. The challenge in Impulse is that a lot of the environments that you're fighting in are open-ish rooms, so it's more of a question of use case in a lot of situations.
Yeah. The way I look at it is Cyclone has one big strength, and I think this is where I agree with Birdseye, that yes, the weapon does have pretty fast projectiles. The flip side, of course, is they're nowhere near as fast as the hit scans. I think there's an exaggeration going on there, where it's almost like Cyclone gets equated to Crusher in like when he has been more vocal about it, which is something I don't agree with. I agree that if you're far enough away, Cyclone is perfect dodgeable. Another thing with it is I think Cyclone is a very easy weapon to deal some damage with. Now, one of the things that Overload is kind of unique about is that damage is sticky. Damage is basically permanent. There is none of this, I'm going to turn a corner and heal up like in Quake or Unreal Tournament. If you deal damage, that pretty much sticks. The only way to heal up consistently is if, points are exchanged, somebody dies and drops shields. Well, at that point, there's still point to it, but that's kind of the thing we're trying to avoid. So I think there's definitely value in this sort of death by 1,000 cuts type weapon, which I think Cyclone is. And like I said, I think it's easy to kind of, drag the crosshair over the enemy and deal, maybe 5, maybe 10, maybe 15 damage. I think it is really, really quite difficult to use Cyclone to great effect. I think it's almost impossible to consistently keep the Cyclone stream on somebody. Why? Because you have to always keep firing, which means there's a continuous stream coming out, and it becomes pretty easy to do all sorts of predictive, sort of evasive maneuvering against the Cyclone. So yes, the Cyclone is just going to hose it all over the place, and he's going to hit something, but keeping it on somebody that is good at dogfighting and good at movement, very difficult. Yeah. Then we get to the hard point, which is this weapon is mounted underneath the pilot on the ship, and it doesn't line up with the crosshair properly. So depending on your range from your target, the point where you have to aim changes quite drastically. Same thing with a driller. If you're in point blank range, you need to aim considerably above the enemy to actually have a chance of kind of hitting them center mass. So I think this is another thing that makes the weapon a lot more difficult to use. And then it's, the points that you made about the spool up or the spin up. You let go of the trigger for a second, it loses the rate of fire. And it has no burst potential. You come around a corner and there's somebody with Impulse or Thunderbolt in your face, you're probably in trouble. Yeah. I think Cyclone definitely has its weaknesses. The same thing, like I said, the tight tunnels, Cyclone spreads. With Impulse, you can fire from one end to the other, and all 4 projectiles make it there. With Cyclone, absolutely not. Something will collide with the wall.
I don't bring Cyclone into Skybox, for instance.
Yeah, exactly.
Just don't do it.
Yes.
Bad idea.
Yeah, Skybox side tunnels, I think, are an excellent example of where I would say Impulse outperforms Cyclone by a mile. Yeah. But in the dogfight area, I would say Cyclone's better. Fast projectiles are more consistent. It's easier to hit targets with them.
And Zero raised a good point months ago about Cyclone and several other weapons in that it's free damage. And yeah, it's bullshit. Free damage is bullshit. It's not fun to take. It's not fun to fight against. It shouldn't really be in the game. But this is what we got. I think in a lot of situations, even though there is travel time for the Cyclone blast, if you a lot of these comments that I'm making, I guess I should have prefaced this at the start of this, are sort of essentially consider all of their usages in Vault and translate that to everything else. Like, Vault is the common denominator for me when I'm thinking about these weapons. For a lot of them, especially like the Cyclone, I'm thinking like shooting from one end of white to the other. So like if you think about that, it's a little bit dodgeable, but you're still taking some free damage. And is that fair? I mean, if you're taking 3 damage out of a huge blast, yeah, sort of. If you're taking 90 damage out of like a lot of blasts, not so much. I think it's predicated on a lot of different factors there. How fair the Cyclone feels, and it's sort of tough to get an accurate gauge of its balance within the current paradigm in that sense.
Kind of want to get one more thing in about Cyclone, and that is its energy consumption. So in order to use it effectively, it pretty much involves just holding down a trigger for a while, which will give away your position. Like you said, it's a pretty loud weapon. So people will know when you're firing it. And I think saying things like free damage is... I can see where it comes from, and I kind of agree and disagree with it. I don't think there's really, free damage. I mean, like, it's just a random pre-fire with impulse that, happens to hit somebody as he comes around the corner. Is that free damage, Right. Is it really free? Possibly, but yeah, I don't think it's the visual clutter is a bit oppressive, but again, the thing is, like I said, you can back off. Like, disengaging is a thing, and I think it's also powerful against Cyclone. I reckon you have a difficult time hitting people with Cyclone that are running away from you.
Somewhat, yeah. I mean, I'm hitting more than impulse, but is, 9, 12, 15 damage really that much more than 0? You know what I mean?
I would say it is, because the damage is more or less permanent, but I totally get what you mean. Like you're not gonna burst somebody down from like 70 HP when they're boosting away from you.
Yeah, if they mistime their retreat, I can get them very close, if not over the line. But if they're, if they see me and back off pretty much immediately, I mean, they're not going to take much damage at all.
Yeah, fair enough. Sorry, Revstro, you were going to say something. I saw the blink up for a second.
No, I'm good.
Oh, okay.
I was just laughing.
All right, fair enough. But I think this brings us to the rating. So, where would you guys say Cyclone is in a 10-point scale?
That's an 8.
All right. 8 out of 10.
I put it...
Yep. Sorry.
I think I put it more like a 6.
6 out of 10. Yeah.
Wow. All right.
Yeah, sure. I would say, personally, that I would also put it... I would put it actually on 7 out of 10. So I consider it to be very similar in terms of power level to the Impulse. I think both of them have distinct strengths and weaknesses, and there are definitely moments where Cyclone clearly outperforms an Impulse, in my opinion, and then there are situations where Impulse is just a clear winner. And I would say they're actually surprisingly well balanced.
Yeah.
But this brings us to my baby, Reflex.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Absolutely. Yeah. Do you guys want to go first?
I'll go first. Reflex is the worst weapon in the game, outright. Just gonna say it. Everyone says it. Everyone agrees with it. It's the worst weapon in the game. It's completely unusable in a competitive sense. Completely unusable in like anything else, basically. I mean, in single player or challenge mode, maybe it's usable, but multiplayer, no. I'm gonna say this. I have seen actual success stories with Reflex, and I'm not talking about like just the troll, the troll games. You know, that one point where Ronkley killed me with the, Reflex.
Yeah. Couple of days ago or whatever. Yeah.
In one game of in a Public Anarchy, when I was playing with Terminal, B2 was also there. He was playing with controller and Reflex, and believe it or not, B2 was actually kicking our asses with it.
What map was it?
It was Blizzard.
Oh, okay.
Interesting. All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Blizzard has very tight areas, actually. But yeah. I mean, it's technically possible. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I'd say it's possible. Like in tighter maps, the Reflex does have some sort of an advantage. Not much, but it's really just like to punish like a really good read or something in like a 1v1, like say in Wraith. You like predict where they're going, you just fill the entire room with Reflex. You'll get some damage off of it. Not a whole lot, but you might get some.
Yeah.
But in bigger rooms, like say the big room in Pyroglyphic or what are some?
Oh, I love that example.
That map nobody plays.
Yeah.
You're not gonna do any damage whatsoever with the Reflex.
Yeah.
Nothing substantial, at least.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of thoughts about this weapon, so Chili, by all means, you go. You go next.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Reflex is a weapon without a roll, and that's mostly because of its lifetime and its damage profile. The damage profile is pitiful, and the lifetime is microsecond. I think it could reach a spot where it's overtuned very easily, and hitting a mark of having a good niche within the current balance paradigm is difficult, but not impossible. I think right now, because it lasts for longer than not a lot of other weapons, but it lasts for long enough and does a little bit of damage. If you try and hold corners with it, for instance, as opposed to waiting for someone to pop the corner and then slap them with impulse or crusher or some of those nature. If you reach around the corner with impulse, you are A, giving up the game that you are on the other side of that corner, and B, you are not doing the kind of damage that you could be if you're using literally any other weapon in the game. Mm-hmm. So the role that the Reflex fills is instead overshadowed by pretty much anything else. It's not it's not effective in, I would say, most to all situations. We're gonna say 90%, 95 even. I think if you have your S key bound instead of your W key, if you are constantly flying backwards, you can kind of get people to chase, and you can shoot them around corners. Is there think of like a chevron, flat hallways, round corners. You never want to chase in Chevron Infinite. You always want to be the one that's getting followed and hold that S key and back around and shoot your weapons and whatever. But even there, the impulse outshines it. You can flood a hallway easily with Reflex, but you're only doing a handful of damage per hit, and you got to be getting a lot of consistent hits to stack it up against anything else. I while we were just talking here, while Revstro was giving his spiel on the weapon, I was made to wonder if Reflex is a good weapon to switch to, but it leaves you very exposed when you do, because your damage output is so low. I think it would be interesting to have a fire Reflex button that didn't require switching to the weapon. It just switched automatically and started firing immediately, so that you wouldn't have to do any other piloting, or take your finger off W to hit 2 however many times or whatever. I guess you could just rebind your button for it.
It's like a proximity bomb from Descent at that point.
Yeah. I think that would be interesting. And in a balance patch that I've sort of been playing around with, I've turned up the lifetime and damage on it, and it's you can see it fill a much more defined role just by turning the damage up by 0.75, not even a full point, just enough of a bump so that people at least respect the damn thing. And the lifetime up significantly so that you can hit around corners and do an effective job of that, rather than using every other weapon for the role that the Reflex was designed for.
I'm gonna bring out the real spiciness now. I think the Reflex nerf should simply be reversed. And please no. And the weapon actually filled a role when it was first released. It punished aggression. Reflex was very easily countered. Just move away from it, and you actually cannot hit anything with it. They will never hit you. In order to suppress a corner, I mean, again, Reflex had very limited range. It did have the homing projectiles, but you could always hear it being fired way further than what the projectiles would actually reach. So when you heard Reflex being fired, you just back off. Simple. I would reckon it would work kind of like a primary version of Creepers, where it would kind of funnel players. Like there would be certain maps where you could funnel people with Reflex. But the weapon would still be outperformed in a dogfight easily. Crusher, Cyclone, way more consistent, way more DPS, faster projectiles. I mean, the weapon would only really work as a defensive weapon. And that's what it did in the early phases. Like, people were just bomb rushing each other in tight areas. And if you rush through a choke point that's being, flooded with Reflex, you're going to take a lot of damage.
Another thing I should add is that if we reverse like the Reflex nerf with the current netcode we have, I think it could have been like possibly one of the best weapons in the game if it kept its homing capabilities.
The thing why I don't really see that too much is, the problem with the homing is that, yeah, sure, it homes if you stick around, but if you just back off, like if you back off, Reflex wasn't any faster, it didn't really deal substantially more damage, you could just back off from it. Another thing why I think the Reflex actually had the homing ability in the first place is because the bounces are wildly inconsistent if you shoot them against decals on different maps. So because the decals actually have a lot of these like weird deformations and angles, the Reflex bounces are completely inconsistent. So you can't actually use it properly unless it's a decal-less map. So
and it's unusable in caves too.
Yeah, exactly. Like in caves, it just won't work. And in dogfight areas, I mean, sure, you can shoot it against somebody, but they're probably so far away from the wall that by the time it bounces, it still expires. So I would say it doesn't really work in dogfights. It only really works in like suppressing certain areas, and it would be very, very good for that. But I reckon it wouldn't actually be overpowered, but it would probably be annoying. Like, I know that there's going to be a contingent of players that are basically going to say, they wouldn't like the change. They would say the weapon doesn't take skill to play, and at a minute it would be easier to use, but the weapon would have a role, and it would actually be usable versus what it is right now. But yeah, I mean, I could see why people wouldn't like it, though. I just think it would give the weapon some viability, which right now I don't think it has. You can just use a Cyclone, suppress an area, and it basically does a better job than Reflex.
Yeah, two bolts from a Cyclone is equal to more than one reflex hit. So if I'm holding a corner and I'm doing the corner strat with the Cyclone, which is to shoot the corner so people don't see the yellow or anything.
Chili.
Once they pop that corner, I just turn and there you go.
Chili, isn't the Reflex bolt as strong as like an individual impulse bolt from a volley of 4? I believe they do actually the same damage.
I don't believe that to be the case.
Okay,
I'm pretty sure Reflex does 5.
Oh, it is less than the impulse then. Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, okay, so it's even weaker. Wow, that's.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it also has the alternating fire, which is another like awkward thing about it. It's just, I think the weapon it has so many things that are wrong with it that it's just I think like the funny thing is I think if it gets the homing bounce back, it's still not really that good. Like I still think it's actually like a weaker weapon, but it would at least be usable under certain circumstances. The alternative, of course, is let's make the projectiles faster, let's give them longer life, and let's increase the damage. I think you can just increase this weapon across the board, and it still won't be anywhere near the other sort of contemporaries. So it's just the weapon is so in the ground that it. So yeah, where would you guys rate the Reflex on a 10-point scale?
2.
1.
2 out of 10, and Revstro is 1 out of 10. Yeah,
it's good in Wraith in a 1v1.
Right.
I think it has some very kind of obscure niche moments when it's arguably good, and that's about it. Like maybe somebody's hiding in some energy center around the corner, and then you're like flooded with Reflex. Sure, hypothetically possible. But yeah, I would say it's 2 out of 10 too. I think it's just way too weak compared to everything else. All right, but guys, you know what time it is? We're getting to the juice now.
Yeah.
The Crusher.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Hell yeah, dude. Let's do it.
All right.
The weapon that almost everybody hates.
Yep.
All right, who wants to go first?
Since I'm a Prominent Crusher user, I will go. So I always hear a lot of people say that Crusher is the best weapon in the game. I somewhat disagree, because I think in some cases it's a pretty weak weapon. I just need to elaborate on this.
Yeah, sure. I think everybody's waiting for that, actually.
Fighting words.
No, but I do like. I actually really want to hear like what the reasoning is. Absolutely.
So the reason why I think it's quite not as strong as everybody thinks it is, because I think shoot. This doesn't really look good for me.
No. Dude. It doesn't matter. Just don't worry about it at all. It's.
Well, to go back on the topic of the Impulse, when I was talking about how it was equal in power to the Crusher, I still stand by it, because I think Impulse would beat Crusher in in a close quarters sort of battle. But if it was a mid-range battle, of course the Crusher's gonna win. It has a decent spread. It's a pretty fast weapon, not a complete hit scan. I'd say it's more ballistic than it is an instant click, you get damage. Frankly, I think the Flak is the only true hit scan weapon. But the Crusher, it does have some good long range damage. Some people use it as the driller, or a weapon just to finish off people, which it has a really good use for. It still does a decent enough damage at long ranges.
Just for reference, what would you consider long damage in terms of segments, roughly speaking?
I'd say about anything beyond 10 segments is considered long range damage.
I love that number, because 10 segments coincidentally is the range that the reflex projectiles have, and that's when they expire. Perfect.
Nice.
Wow, I actually didn't know that. More you know.
10 units in the editor, you mean?
No, 40 units in editor.
40.
10 default segments. But how much? Actually, Revstro, how much damage would you say the Crusher deals at about 10 segments?
I'd say it does a little more than the driller.
So slightly above 10 then?
Yes, slightly above 10.
Alright.
But I think at that point I'd rather use the driller for more consistent damage. Because
that makes sense, yeah.
The Crusher is a spread fire weapon, so you're not going to get consistent damage at long ranges.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. That's good. I'm guessing Chile. Sorry, did you have another point, or do you want to go to?
I think that's about it. I didn't really make my case, did I?
No. I honestly, I think you have 6 points here that I think are perfectly valid. But I'm guessing Chile is about to burst, so by all means, you have the floor.
Yeah, I've got.
Can I tear me up, dude?
Oh shit!
All right, so I guess so long range for me is not as long as 10 default segments. I guess I'm gonna put it a little more in layman's terms, I suppose. We're gonna say the top of purple in Vault to the other end of white. That is long range to me. That is as long as range is feasible. if that sentence makes sense, which it
wait, top of purple, so that's the side little tunnel there.
Yeah.
From back of that to what, to the back of white?
Yeah.
Because that's about 10 segments.
Okay, well, there you go.
That should be. It's maybe it's 8 to 10. That's roughly the same ballpark.
Okay. Yeah. Well, there you have it then. So that's long range for me. So well, I would almost put that in the ballpark of very long range. That distance that I just said is as long as I'm willing to say is long range, anything further is very long, if not impractical range.
So
like that's just outside of anything you're really gonna be. That's like that's all edge cases. I would say 99% of engagements in Overload happen within that range that I just described.
Yes, I think I agree with that.
Okay. And then I would say the front of long range, so like the shortest I would be saying long range is that that sort of pillar support thing. So from purple to pillar in white, that divider between the two hallways. So yeah. Okay, so just sort of contextualize that, I guess.
That's pretty consistent. Yeah.
I would. Okay, so this might sound strange as resident Cyclone user here, but there could have been, had I not kept changing my control scheme through early access, there could have been a universe in which I was a diehard Crusher user in multiplayer.
Right.
I used a hell of a lot of Crusher in challenge mode in early access. That was the first weapon that I got good with. I learned a lot of 6-staff combat on Crusher. Granted, I'd played Descent for 20 years beforehand and, that kind of thing. But I was always using the default control scheme with A is forward, Z is backward, arrow keys to steer, shit like that. I'd never tried like an actual shooter setup for controls in a 6-staff until Overload. So I grew to love the Crusher. It's fun. It's punchy. It makes a nice noise. It does a lot of damage. It's a great weapon. Like it's really good. I really enjoy the Crusher in a visceral sense. It is getting hit by it and seeing it dominate with not terribly much effort at all. That's the reason for my consternation with it in multiplayer. Tobias put together that patch for displaying Crusher trails a couple of weeks ago. And when I jumped into a lobby and I was like, it was a centrally located lobby in the US. So I had like 50 ping to it. I don't use Crusher. I only recently, within the last few months, changed to a control scheme that would allow me to use Crusher.
All right.
I jumped in, turned on Crusher trails so that I could sort of see them. And I won every single one of those anarchies that I was in.
Very good.
Like, Tobias was there, Miasmic was there, competent Crusher pilots were in there, and I was the one to come out on top. Like, I don't practice with that weapon. I don't use that weapon. Like, I understand it a lot because I played with it in challenge mode for a while. But, I don't know. Like, it's a tight screen, and the travel time is present, but I would argue that it is impractical to say that there is travel time to that weapon. If you pull the trigger on something in medium range, so purple in vault to the first half of the white room there, like that, you're not gonna have to lead much at all to get a significant chunk of damage, and the closer you get, the more negligible that travel time is. Like it might as well be hit scan in a lot of situations.
Okay.
I think the damage profile is obnoxious. The spread is tighter than I think anyone really expected, because it was tough to gauge that without the Crusher trails. But once you have the Crusher trails, you can sort of examine that and just use that as your crosshair instead of the actual crosshair. It's a fairly tight screen with a lot of pellets. I've played around with slowing the projectiles down in balance patches and stuff. I think that would work well to counter your point, Revstro, about it being used as a pseudo driller at long ranges. It's essentially a weapon inside its own cloaking device. You can't see it. It's tough to hear the bang go off.
and you're just taking a lot of damage. So if someone gets behind you or on your side and you're not expecting it, or you have looked away for a split second and they came up, for a flank on you, like that's it. You're done.
Fair enough.
So it's I don't know. It's in a tough spot.
I kind of want
to. Yeah, go for it.
No. It's just I kind of want to ask like a sort of a directing question. So I think Revstro more or less considers the Crusher to be at least at an acceptable point in terms of balance, or did I get that wrong?
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily think it's like a super balanced weapon. Frankly, I think it's quite overpowered.
Okay.
Like for long ranges, like if it were up to me, I'd change like the damage drop off to be a lot higher for the Crusher.
So do you mean like the actual individual projectiles becoming weaker over range, or do you mean increasing the spread perhaps? So they actually lose like damage per projectile. That's that would be the nerf. Okay, because I don't think that's how it works right now. I think the damage reduction just comes from the actual like general spread, the weapon kind of spreading, and then like not as many projectiles hit. But okay, so you would actually like straight up like change the projectile damage over it. All right, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, so you consider it to be overpowered. And I wanted to ask the same question from Chile. Like, if you consider the weapon to be overpowered, like, what would be the thing you would change about it?
Well, projectile speed, size of the initial spread. Would it make it a larger screen and easier to use? Yes, but if you keep the number of projectiles the same, they're trying to fill a larger space, you're going to be hitting with fewer projectiles. It's going to be way tougher, if not impossible, to get, the big boy 30 plus damage hits, that are, in my opinion, very prevalent among Crusher use. Maybe turn down damage per pellet, but I don't know. I'd like to see the speed and the initial spread change first. I don't think we're in a position to change the initial spread. I think that's hard-coded elsewhere in the game that we don't really have access to. So maybe a damage nerf is the more practical solution. But I think there are ways to nerf it without changing too much about the shall we say absolute damage profile.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well. All right. I actually have quite a few ideas about Crusher or thoughts on the weapon. Overload has 6-off movement, and 6-off movement is, in my experience, the most powerful movement system I have ever had in a computer game, or in like a shooter game. I've played a bunch of pretty high speed arena shooters in the past. Things like Quake, Unreal Tournament, Team Fortress 2, not so much the classic one. And in all those games, you can go pretty damn fast if you want to. But the unpredictability that 6-off movement permits is completely on another level. To the point where, in my mind, it's clear that this movement is incredibly powerful. If you get into a dogfight, let's say it's sort of impulse versus impulse, both players are continuously firing, and the dogfight goes on for more than 10 or 15 seconds. That means almost nothing is hitting, and people are pretty close to each other. So it's it's clear that this movement is incredibly powerful, and I think this is what makes the Crusher so appealing, because the movement is so powerful in 6-off. The Crusher is a consistent weapon. Now people say, it doesn't take skill to use. Bullshit. It does take skill to use. The problem I think the problem with Crusher is that once you're sufficiently good, it becomes completely overpowering. Like it's just the optimal choice in a lot of situations. I don't think it's the best weapon for all situations. I can certainly think of, tight tunnel cases where Impulse will outperform the Crusher, but there's just, a lot of scenarios where it's just very good to have the Crusher out. It's, why not, right? It's consistent. You can get some nice little burst damage in. It's a good weapon. Now, another thing that I like about it is actually the fairly tight spread. And this is another thing where, again, it does take skill to use. It's just that if your aim is on point, it's going to be really, really good. But if you can't aim well, then, you're going to miss the shots. And if you had the wider spread, you'd still deal some damage. But, and then this isn't to kind of tear down the idea of let's increase the spread. I actually think it's a good idea. But yeah, the thing with Crusher is it's so consistent. It deals good burst. It's very consistent in open areas. I do think it's not that great in tight areas. I know there's a couple of people that sort of disagree with that, but yeah, the thing with it is it's going to be nearly impossible to balance because obviously this idea of let's reduce the projectile speed will balance the weapon. Make no mistake, like you can reach a point where Crusher is perfectly counterable and in line with other weapons, but you will pretty much sacrifice the weapon's identity in the process. You basically make an ammo Thunderbolt at that point if the projectiles are sufficiently slow, because functionally you have to fire your shot manually, and they both are kind of burst damage weapons. So yeah, I think the Crusher is just a weapon where it just outperforms in just a little.
It's never the wrong answer.
Yeah, there's
Crusher is never the wrong answer, and that's what I think a lot of people find it. That's why I think a lot of people find it to be overpowered. If you bring it anywhere into any situation, I can't think of a single situation in which having a Crusher is a bad thing.
Well, I do think like it doesn't have one thing that for example Impulse has, and this is the potential to kind of pre-fire. Like this is the one thing that Impulse can do. Like you can just suppress an area, and people it will deter people. You can't really do that with Crusher. I do agree with Revstro that I think that the problem with Crusher is it's one of these weapons ultimately where unless we fundamentally change it, it's always going to be at least very good in capable hands. Because it's consistent. It's a consistent weapon in 6 DOF. You can't get around that. I do agree with Revstro that this weapon doesn't have instant travel time. Yes, if you're in a let's say you're 5 seconds away from somebody, it's functionally hit scan. But there are actually quite a lot of scenarios where the weapon doesn't instantly hit. Like you can aim center mass at 10 segments away, and if they're moving perpendicular to you, you won't actually hit them. Like you can actually miss with this weapon. But yeah, I think it's just a little bit too good in a few too many situations. And I would say one of the things is to just be very cunningly simple and just nerf the damage 10%, for example. I think it would be enough to shift the breakpoint from, it takes, 3 to 4 hits to kill somebody to now it takes, 4 to 5 hits to kill somebody. And I think that already would actually have a surprisingly profound effect on the weapon's balance. But it wouldn't, kill the weapon. Like you can still use it and it'll still function the same way. The other one would obviously be, let's increase the spread, right? Which again keeps the weapon functioning the same way, but it's just, tunes the damage down at range. Or Revstro's idea of let's actually turn down the bullet damage over range. I think that's perfectly acceptable too. But ultimately, yes, it's a consistent weapon, and unless we can fundamentally redesign the weapon, we're not gonna kind of, I think, fix the underlying problem that a lot of people have with it, which is the consistency. Point and click and you will hit.
Point and click and you will hit. That takes a lot of skill.
But it does take skill. That's the thing, though. It takes good aim. I mean, and the quite a few people have that. They are accurate enough with it, and they're very, very good and very, very strong with it. And that's I should
add one more thing.
Yeah, go for it.
Dodging the Crusher is actually not as hard as you think. Take for example, players like for a time being Zero when he was still in the league, and Birdseye. I've seen them when I use my Crusher. They move barely. When I'm trying to kill him with a Crusher, I'll just hit him side to left and right, but they'll just move very slowly side to side. Just juke my Crusher.
Yeah.
I think if people took on that skill more against Crusher players, I think they could get a really good advantage over Crusher players.
Yeah, I would say that something that I don't think people talk too much is the actual idea of evasive maneuvering, right? And it could be a really subtle thing. You can mess up somebody's aim because they're trying to kind of predict your movement, and you just stop moving, like you said, and they'll overshoot or over aim it. Yeah, I think evasive maneuvering is really what the game kind of is largely about. I think it dogfights. I think this idea of somebody's firing impulse action. I'm dodging the individual projectiles. I don't think that's really what's going on. You're just kind of seeing where the general projectiles or the stream is going, and then you kind of do evasive maneuvering around that. I'm not really buying into the I'm dodging individual projectiles. I think once the thing is out, it takes half a second to reach you. Half that is like human reaction times and and yada yada. So I don't think dodging individual projectiles is often that realistic in a dogfight. It's more evasive maneuvers. But yeah, I think the problem is you can kind of do that with Crush, and agreed, it's possible to mess up the aim. But it's just that I think there are going to be people that are never going to be satisfied with it because it is still going to be more consistent than, say, Impulse. And like I know Birdseye really likes the idea of not really having weapons that can consistently hit. Like there always has to be the two stages, right? First you aim, then you fire, and then you have the second stage where the opponent can now kind of alter their movement and has a chance to duck and weave and take cover. But yeah, I would say the weapon is. I would say the weapon is just a little bit too good overall, but I don't think it's good, but I don't think it's as ridiculous as people make it out to be. I think it's a little bit too good, but not by a mile. Like I think it needs surprisingly fine tweaking. I would make very fine tweaks.
Agreed.
But now we come to the rating. What would you rate it as? I'll let Chili go first this time.
I'm tempted to give it a 10.
Oh, nice.
But well, like I said, there are approximately 0 situations in which having a crusher is a bad thing. It's one of the only weapons that can chase down a flag runner, or somebody in full retreat and do fairly consistent damage.
Would you take crusher into tight tunnels though?
Question.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, fair enough.
You just put a screen up and you dominate, that chunk of the tunnel.
Shall I put it down as 10 out of 10?
Sure, why not?
All right, fair enough.
Let's live a little.
Absolutely, why not? What about you, Revstro? What would you?
You see, I don't necessarily agree with it putting it as a 10 because I agree with everyone here saying that it is a very solid weapon. And in a lot of cases, it is very effective, but I honestly don't see how it's like the best weapon overall. So I'm gonna say an 8.
All right, 8 out of 10. I think the weapon is acceptable if it's an 8 out of 10. I would rate it as 9 out of 10. I think it's because it's consistent. There's always going to be the situations where you can force energy users into pretty much using hit scan because hit scans can just consistently hit while they can't. So from that kind of mechanical interaction alone, I think it's going to be an 8 out of 10 over Impulse. And I think because of where its kind of power level is, I would actually write it as a 9 out of 10. But I will say this, I think the weapon does not need heavy nerfing. It just needs like a little bit of tuning down.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think the reality is that as people get better at the game, the hit scan is inevitably going to be slightly better than the energy, pretty much always. But not by a mile, but by a little bit. Like it's just always going to be the little bit of kind of superior aim and whatnot, and like the weird angles and weird scenarios and the weird situations where you can deal damage and the energy guy cannot return damage. I think you're always going to run into a situation where the hit scan is a little bit better. But yeah, I would say it's a 9 out of 10. All right.
One last.
Yeah, sure.
I've mentioned Tobias's Crusher Trails patch. I think that is going to have. I think it'll be interesting to see if that is encouraged to be adopted in the league.
Oh yes.
Because it makes Crusher stupefyingly easy to aim with, in my opinion. It is so much easier to use that weapon. But at the same time, it cancels a lot of the shitty stealth effects that it has. Like you can see where the last blast came from. So if they miss a fair amount of their first the first or second Crusher shot or something like that, you have a much better sense
of where the enemy is aiming and what they're what they're thinking essentially in terms of aiming at you, and you're better able to counter that. So I think that'll have a twofold effect that might cancel each other out, or we're going to see a lot more Crusher usage, or maybe we won't. I mean, I don't know. I think it's going to be very interesting if that sees wider adoption, and how that changes the meta a bit, because that's a pretty significant change compared to what we have now.
Yeah, I would like to definitely see the Crusher trail as being, an option that anybody, everybody can decide whether or not they want to use it. But I would like this to be kind of implemented officially, so that use it as you want, and set whichever trails you want to set. I think there's really no downside to kind of implementing that. If anything, it'll have kind of a mild sort of nerfing or perhaps buffing effect, like you said. You said it was easier to aim with it. Who knows? Maybe it's good for the user. But I think there's no harm in really having that as part of the official game. Sorry, Revstro, you were going to say something, I think.
No, I wasn't going to say anything.
Oh, okay, fair enough. All right, that's the Crusher. Now we get to another spicy cannon. So the Driller.
Aha.
This is another interesting one. The Driller. So this is the one that really kind of puzzles me. And this is kind of where I wish Birdseye was here, because when we were talking about Crusher and Crusher nerfs, he was the person that said, if we were to nerf Crusher, we would also have to nerf the Cyclone and the Driller. And this was the part that kind of puzzled me, because I haven't really heard a lot of people complain about the Driller being overpowered. I know a couple of people don't like the Cyclone too much, but the Driller, I don't really like. What do you guys think about it? Like, where would you guys think this weapon is currently?
I'll jump in on this because I'm an avid Driller user in challenge mode. I have hundreds of hours listening to those same 4 sound effects of that weapon over and over again.
Yeah.
I think Driller in multiplayer is in an interesting spot. I would argue that it is among the hit scans, and I think among the weapons, it's fairly well balanced, but slightly overpowered in its damage profile. I think turning it down by 5-10%. Maybe take, the 0.75 damage from the Driller and give it to the Reflex. You know what I mean?
All right.
It's a 10-shot kill. 10 shots aren't terribly difficult to land, especially on lower ping. But once you get, into the 50s plus, it gets harder and harder. In a team environment and in an anarchy environment, it's a fantastic flanker and third partier. But I think the 10 and sometimes 11 shot kill is I think that's a good and fair balance. I could also see, the weapon being slowed down slightly to make that a little more challenging at long ranges, but this is the long range weapon. That's what it's there for. The weapon hardpoint is below the ship, similar to Cyclone, which makes aiming it in some cases very, very challenging. The point blanks of the game and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I will always respect good Driller play in the current meta, because 10 shots is difficult to hit with the Driller. If you're working them down just with that weapon, that's hard. Good aim for that amount of time is difficult. You're generally not going to be playing in Flak's range, where it's going to be 25 hits at close range over a short-ish period of time. You're going to have to be working people down and hitting those shots consistently. I like where it's at, personally. I wouldn't really want to see too much of a change to it. Again, I could see turning the damage down very slightly. But if it doesn't see that, I guess all the better. I don't think we see enough Driller usage to be particularly oppressive in the league right now, but if everybody suddenly switched to Driller tomorrow and was very good at it, then I could see the conversation shifting pretty significantly.
All right, yeah, makes sense. Revstro, you want to give us your thoughts?
Okay, so to go back on my tier list from a few days ago, I don't know if you know this, but I put Driller at the very top, and I still stand by it.
All right.
I think the driller has some hidden potential
Mhm.
that not a lot of people are capitalizing on.
Mhm.
The thing with the driller is that you have to keep your distance from your opponent. If you do that successfully, like against an impulse user or like a crusher user, you can easily beat them every single time.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't even need missiles to help you out, though it probably would. Maybe if you had like missile pods, but we're not talking about secondaries right now, are we?
Right,
Not
right.
yet.
But there are some shortcomings, obviously, about the driller. Like in short range combat, you're gonna want to use something else other than the driller, like an impulse or crusher.
Mhm.
Like it does not do enough damage at all at close range to be viable, unless you have missiles to back you up.
Mm-hmm.
But during like long range like combat, like it could be like anything, like in Vault, like from that pillar to the White Room, it shines a lot there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Plus, it's very easy to actually land hits with the driller at long range. I mean, go figure, it's a hit
Yeah.
scan weapon.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's its role.
It's also worth pointing out that it has considerably faster projectiles than Crusher. Just like
Yeah.
throwing that out too.
Yeah, and it's also it shoots faster than the Crusher, which is why I said earlier when we were discussing about the Crusher, I would rather switch to a driller for long range combat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's certainly like a point at which you kind of want to go from Crusher to Driller because it just becomes more reliable. Yeah. I think Revstro brought in a very interesting point that see, the Driller was the thing that I always imagined ever since the beta and before that it was going to be the most powerful weapon in the game. And this is something where I kind of wanted to get this sort of shout out, and I think it was Puddles or Slick, somebody from OMG basically threw out that they wanted that we talked about the netcode. I think Driller is the weapon that, for me personally, is the most frustrating to use because I get a lot of these shots that I see hit enemy ship pretty much center mass, and then they don't count server side.
Oh yeah.
And I think Driller is particularly susceptible to this. And this is kind of where my idea came in, that I kind of wish that Driller worked more like the single player counterpart, the Driller M, which has double the rate of fire but basically half the damage. So Driller I think right now deals like 10.5 or maybe 11 damage, and I would drop it down to either 4.5 or 5 damage, so basically slightly less than half, and I would double the rate of fire, so the weapon would be slightly more consistent now. I think this, even though the raw damage numbers would go down, I think this would slightly potentially buff the weapon because you can just more consistently hit people. If you kind of drag the crosser across the opponent, something will most likely hit. Right now, I think Revstro is kind of on the money with people probably don't capitalize on it because I too think that. I think that the final stage of Overload, we've seen this in previous arena shooters, Pro Quake scene, for example. People become very avoidant of one another, they try to control the resources, and they try to take the sort of they try to get a favorable engagement from all sorts of weird angles, and distance always seems to be a big part of it. So the Driller, I think, again, it's a sniper weapon. Pretty much no other weapon can touch it given enough distance. It is the most consistent weapon, fastest projectiles.
Yeah.
And I think definitely this weapon is really, really, really high potential. I do think the netcode is kind of screwing it over to a certain extent.
Yeah, it's really holding it back.
Which I think is good. I mean, if the netcode was good, the Driller would be really stupefyingly oppressive.
Yeah, but the Driller would have been nerfed by now, most likely.
Yeah.
We would have ganked it by now pretty hard.
Yep. Yeah, we'd have torn the game open just to figure out how to do that, I think.
But I will say this, though. The Driller definitely is awkward to use. Like it's not very easy to use because of that hard point. And I think like Cyclone, it's not as bad, but with Driller, like the awkward hard point, you can really feel it, particularly when the distances shift, rather quickly. The aim point just becomes it's a mess in that regard. So I think it's a surprisingly difficult to use weapon. But if you keep the distance, like Revstro said, you don't even need missiles. This thing will even if you hit an enemy a couple of times, those 20 damage, they're going to stick around. So death by 1,000 cuts. It's I definitely think it's very powerful, and I think keeping your distance is very powerful in general. So yeah.
I think of Driller often in the context of Burning Indica. And the counterplay to Impulse in there. Impulse holds down that main hallway like pretty well, and then from the main room to the super room, like Impulse is gonna do pretty damn well there. But if someone rounds that corner at the end of the hall and you're sitting there at the corner of the super room with a Driller, like you're gonna get some decent damage on them if the netcode and ping work out in your favor and your aim is on point. And I think in that sort of context, the Driller is pretty decent right now. It's in the third partying when you're like right next to someone and you're able to just hit them over and over and over and over and over again. That's when I can see arguments for it being slightly overpowered in much the same way that that Crusher kind of gets mud thrown on it. It's just fast damage. It doesn't take much skill to shoot the side of a ship that's not really facing you, and it's consistent.
It's like the weird thing is. It seems like we all kind of agree that on paper Driller is really good, right? Like there's super high potential. It's a really very solid weapon, and yet we don't see it being used. And I thought it was kind of funny. The other day, I think it was Tomcat or somebody was kind of asking for like a Driller buff, and I thought to myself, we really don't see that weapon. I guess if we want it, or if there are people that want it buffed, because I thought it was kind of strange. I never considered Driller to be underpowered, but it's we don't actually see it used that much. I know Terminal used it, Fyrex used to use it, and I know I occasionally pull it out, but I don't think I'm really a very prominent Driller user. So we don't really see it yet. On paper, seems super good. And I
think my response to that was hit your shots, wasn't it?
Yeah.
If you want to buff to the Driller, shoot it better. Like,
and I think I said that at a certain distance, it is the most consistent weapon. Yeah. But yeah, it's a funny one. Let's go to the ratings. What would you guys rate it as, or rate it at, I suppose?
Okay. Here, I'll just dive right the hell in on this controversy. That's a 10.
Really? Driller 10. All right.
Yeah.
Gotcha. By all means.
My rating isn't necessarily a power scale. It's almost a usefulness scale.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I kind of want to ask this. Why don't you use it more?
That's a good question. I feel like I can't utilize it to its fullest potential, and there's a lot of hand waving and flailing around in Overload that the Cyclone sort of counters that the Driller really can't. And that was sort of not like the choice I made when I started playing Overload multiplayer, and now I can't go back ever. Like, I'll pull the Driller out. Yeah, I've pulled Driller out on 100 ping before to get the job done. But it just, I feel like I can get at least something done consistently with Cyclone instead of getting a lot done inconsistently with Driller. And I would rather have the consistency of filling spaces and small damage rather than hoping and praying the netcode works out in my favor for the punch damage.
It's kind of funny. I would have had a completely different answer to that question, and I think it's kind of funny. I think the weapon just doesn't fit your playstyle. Simple as that.
Which is interesting because I've been using Driller for, I would say, half, if not 2/3 of early access in challenge mode.
Yeah, but
it was the weapon I went to after after Crusher predominantly.
Yeah, it's just kind of funny because like when I think about you in the game, I think about you kind of hyper aggressive, getting up in everybody's face, right, and kind of tie them up, and that the driller is just like the Cyclone is so much better for that, I would say. But yeah, interesting. By all means, Revstro, where would you stand?
Okay, so for my rating, I was going to lean on putting it at a 10.
Okay.
But since it's like not at like I said, it still has some potential, but it's just not there yet. I'm gonna leave it at a 9.
All right, yeah, that makes sense. Funny, and I'm actually at the point where I would say, simply kind of judging by the way the weapons are being used right now, and because of the netcode and kind of all these things working together, I would say Driller is like just below Crusher, so I would actually put it as an 8 out of 10. So yeah, I would say like Crusher and Driller still are kind of a notch above energy, generally speaking, but yeah, I think Driller has a very high potential. I think the netcode kind of keeps it back or holds it back, and as it currently stands, it's good. It just kind of lacks that special something for me right now.
How wholesome.
Absolutely. All right, but now we're gonna get to an interesting one. What do you guys think about Flak?
Yeah.
Revstro, by all means, you take this one.
Okay. So for the Flak, I have it almost at the same level as the Reflex, but hear me out.
No, I like this. This is spicy, man. Go on.
But I think that the Flak is like leagues better than the Reflex, but that's really not saying much because it's a short range weapon. It's it pretty much like the Impulse will like beat the Flak in my opinion if you're like competent at dodging or I mean not dodging, like
backing away.
Backing away, yeah. Take down your reverse key, let's go. So yeah, the Flak, I just really don't have much to say about it, to tell you the truth. It's a short range weapon, and it's pretty much almost guaranteed damage at that short range. Not much else to say.
Yeah. Shall I go second? I have a few thoughts about Flak. So, Flak was another one of those weapons that I think was used to good effect and worked because people didn't counterplay it properly in the early access. I think it has like a similar story with Reflex where, again, it can... So here's the thing. I don't think it was necessarily overpowered, but I do think it kind of perhaps forced people to, or would have forced people to play in a way that they would not consider very fun. So even though the weapon technically isn't very overpowered, it can be kind of unfun and sort of oppressive to some people. I always thought the Flak wasn't that good. It has a number of weaknesses. Obviously, very limited range, which means, if you're going to push into somebody, you're probably going to sacrifice pretty substantial damage just getting into range. You haven't even dealt any damage yet, and you probably tanked, 20, 30, maybe 40 damage. Admittedly, it was very good once you got into range. Pretty easy to hit. Nice, big flat cloud in front of you. Then the other one is self-damage. And this is kind of the weird sort of point that I don't know how much people have actually looked at the data on this, but from what I understood, people that use Flak a lot deal a surprisingly large amount of self-damage.
Yeah, it's really easy to kill yourself with a Flak. I've done it myself before.
Yeah, you see, you're in a dogfight with somebody, you kind of point blank, they rub against the wall, and you're just following after them, and you just hit the wall in front of you for half a second, and that's 10 shields gone right there. It's just, it seems to be a surprisingly dangerous weapon to use. Guess what? You're in a dogfight, point blank range, you're also splashing yourself against the enemy. It's just, I don't know what the numbers are, again, But I want to say almost in every game where I see people use the Flak, there's at least one suicide with the Flak. It seems to be surprisingly substantial. It's a weapon that, like Revstro, I consider to definitely be on the weaker end of things. I think the weaknesses are really substantial. And again, I think there's really power in range, and Flak has none. Also, you can pretty much boost away from a Flak user. I think it's just fairly simple to disengage in this game in general. I know some people would disagree with that, but ultimately you can boost, and if they want to keep up with you, they also have to boost, but they can't, shoot and boost at the same time. Mm-hmm. So yeah, Flak, I don't think it's very good. But I think it's one of those weapons that isn't it is kind of in a surprisingly healthy place. It's just slightly on the weaker end. But this is the way where I think hit scan is okay in a 6-off game. It's consistent with very significant weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's just be glad it's not the Vulcan in D1.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you there. Chili, by all means, what do you think about Flak?
Yeah, I think y'all are tripping. Flak's great. Flak is very situational. It's obviously the salt cannon. When someone gets the Flak out, that is worth making a call out to your team for, and being like, oh, they got the Flak out there, tilting. Just keep capitalizing on that. But I think it also has some situational use as a primary. On certain maps, certain densities of players, certain setups, you can really get a lot done. It's a great flanker. It's a great third partier. I enjoy using it a lot personally. And it doesn't quite fit with what most people think to be my piloting style, because there's two principles to it essentially. The first is be in range and hit your shots, which I guess are two principles separately, but whatever. We'll give it to it.
We'll go with it.
And then the other one is don't get hit. And if both of those things work out for you, then that's great. You're using the Flak effectively. What Flak does is once you're in range with it, you put it's not hard to get at least some damage onto an enemy with the Flak. The projectiles feel huge, they deal splash damage, and it's both of those things make it decent damage profile. So when you're hitting someone with the Flak consistently, which should not be terribly hard at that range, you've put them on a clock. They have to solve a problem, and the problem is you. And you have to just hold on. You don't if you don't get hit using the Flak, you're going to get that kill, because all you have to do is face up against them. That is it. You only have to orient your ship and hold the fire button. And if you're dodging out of the way of everything they're hitting, you're going to get that kill. And I think the interplay between two pilots and one of them holding the Flak that's really interesting. I don't necessarily think it's particularly fun in a long-term sense, which I think in terms of a meta, if Flak suddenly became the meta, it'd be kind of garbage, because two Flak users going at it against each other, that's just that sounds like a really dumb time. But you can get under people's skin with the Flak pretty easily, because you present yourself as a major imminent threat, even if you aren't necessarily.
See, this is one of those things I probably want to kind of clarify. I actually think Flak is a surprisingly fun weapon to use. I think it's a healthy weapon. I think it's a fun weapon to use. I don't think it's usually the optimal weapon to use. That's the thing with it. That's why I say it's kind of the weaker end of things. I think you can use a different weapon and get a better result overall.
Yeah, sometimes.
Because ultimately, I think the problem with the Flak is you're close to somebody. If you're close to somebody, pretty much no matter what, you are actually vulnerable. Yes, you might win the engagement by all means, but you are vulnerable. And that's kind of the thing you can, for example, avoid with the driller. Just blink them from 20 segments away, and they can't really return fire. So it's kind of like situations like this where I don't think it's the optimal weapon, but I think it's a fun weapon, and I personally enjoy using it. I don't really get the whole like oh, this weapon means that somebody's tilted. I'm not really. I guess I don't really have that sort of interaction with these weapons, but I think it is a fun weapon. And I think it's a healthy weapon. I think it's nice to have this weapon in the game.
Yeah. I think as sort of a, not like counterpoint, but to go along with your line of thinking of, this, it's not really the optimal weapon to use in most situations. We're seeing, as the OTL goes on and matures here, 3 seasons in, people like the dense maps with a lot of pilots in them. People like that intense action, that very, the high octane, big damage, get 8 Devastator kills in 1 missile, and all that kind of stuff. Think of like I brought back as far as the one, maybe this was like the season 1 mid-season tournament or whatever, where it was PTMC against 3 Queens, went to terminal. I think it was trios or quads in there. I think it was quads in there. Like it was just totally stacked up. Like this totally insane number of pilots in that space. That's the kind of thing where I think Flak really totally shines.
Yes.
It isn't necessarily a finisher. You're not getting crazy high kill counts. But I would wager if you look at the damage after a game like that, where you've got a lot of pilots in a very tight space, whoever's using the Flak is probably coming out on top in terms of those damage numbers.
I do agree with you that it's something that tends to happen in OTL. I do think this is a kind of a common thing where we actually play maps with way higher player counts than the maps are intended for. Like, for example, like Terminal and Vault and Blizzard, I consider these maps to legitimately be 1v1 maps. And they're playable in 2v2. But these to me are 1v1 maps. The fact that we're playing like trios and quads in there, I think is, to me, I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't actually find those games that fun. I like, this is the reason why I think we have custom maps, which are substantially larger and actually support these player counts. I do agree with you that yes, if you have like 3 people, or sorry, like 6 people in the same dogfight, and like they're all like slinging Flak at each other and splashing each other, absolutely, like Flak is gonna be really good. But like the question in my head is this kind of is this peak overload? Is my question then? Like is the idea, or is this kind of what we want to go towards, where we have these huge player counts in these tiny maps? Like is this what people really truly enjoy, or does it just happen to be something that occurs because, oh, these people have this home map and this is like the only map that we know?
I think it's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B.
Fair enough.
PTMC, for instance, has homes in like Labyrinth and stuff, and that's comfortable for quads, even quints. 5v5.
Yeah, that's a pretty big map.
I would not expect to pretty much ever see, except for like Mickey, pull the Flak out in there, because the topography just does not make sense for that weapon.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
So it's sort of it'll fill a space much in much the same way that a Cyclone does. It shines in those open rooms with a lot of pilots, and you're just trying to get damage out. If you're in a dogfight with, say you got 2 players on your team and 3 on the other, and y'all are in, here we go again, White Room on Vault, you're going to be damaging not just 1, but potentially 2, and, in 1 or 2 instances, maybe all 3 of the enemy pilots at the same time with the Flak.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see it being powerful in certain situations. Anyway, guys, we're actually, I don't mean to rush, but we're going surprisingly slowly, but I think
we're going slow as fuck.
I will say this. I think primary weapons do kind of require more discussion than secondary. I think secondaries are going to be a lot more straightforward. So anyway, shall we go to the ratings? Unless you guys have any more thoughts on Flak.
Yeah, sure. Let's go.
All right, Revstro, what would you say? Where is Flak?
I'd say a solid 4.
4 out of 10. Gotcha. Chili.
That's a 6.
6 out of 10. Yeah, quite like that. This is actually where I would say I'm kind of on. This is so weird. I'm constantly in between you two with the ratings. I'm gonna say I'm gonna go with 6 out of 10 myself too. I think it's definitely a notch below Cyclone and Impulse. Mm-hmm. But it definitely has its moments where it's really quite nice.
Yeah, I wouldn't want it to be anywhere else.
All right, but now we're gonna get to I want to say maybe the most interesting weapon in the game, Thunderbolt.
Yeah, fusion cannon.
Fun fact about the Thunderbolt. Did you know that the Thunderbolt in multiplayer has no ship shake? Yeah, it doesn't shake the ship in multi. Funny.
Yeah.
But that's kind of just a little tangent. By all means, who wants to go first?
I'll go first on this one, I think.
All right, go for it.
As a resident, not very often Thunderbolt user.
Very good.
This is the other weapon I was thinking of when I made my first comment about Impulse. Almost 2 hours ago. That this is one of the weapons in the game that functions. In both form and function is very similar to the D1 and 2 counterparts. I didn't play much D3, but I don't think the fusion changed all that much there either.
Not really, no.
Yeah, it's yeah. I mean, people still call it the fusion. It's big. It's purple.
One thing. You could fire like triple fusion in D3 with the tank ship, but that's just a little difference.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's good. I think there's always that identity crisis that I think people have about it with the one-shot kill on the charge and stuff. And the answer to that here is you take so little overcharge damage. In 1v1, I think it's significantly less powerful than in prior games 1v1 metas. It is the champion weapon in D1. If you're taking big dick swings with that in D1, you know what you're doing. Mm-hmm. I hate it in D1. The hitboxes are way bigger than the projectiles. It hits the walls all the time. It's ridiculous. In Overload, I hate being shot by it there as well, but I don't mind using it as much. Mostly because in Overload, I feel like all of the bolts are about a half ship length ahead of where they are. Like visually, like the hitbox is projected forward due to the ping issue, or not issues, but like the ping and the netcode and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I find using it is a little bit simpler. It's more approachable because it doesn't like glance off of weird walls and fizzle there and stuff like that. Damage profile leaves a bit to be desired, but depending on again, this is very much dependent on where you're engaging people, how many people are in the match, and what kind of match it is.
I'm chilling. I'd like to ask here, what do you mean by the damage profile leaves to be wished for, or what did you mean by that?
It doesn't one-shot kill. It only does 80 on a full charge.
So would you like it to one-shot? Is that the issue? Oh, okay. Just checking real quick.
With how inconsistent a lot of Overload's balance is, I think having a one-shot primary is not conducive to a good time.
Okay.
It would just feel shitty to die to, and like, yeah, I don't know. I think there would need to be some significant changes to the weapon in other ways. I haven't really given much thought to what those would be. Probably massively increased overcharge damage if we were to get a one-shot potential. But yeah, I don't know. It's in a weird spot, and I don't have enough practice with D1's fusion to really have a good historical perspective on where I think Thunderbolt should be. I think it's good. If you're in a big team game, it's great. For dealing damage and holding hallways and that kind of thing. Wider anarchies, it's not as great at all because people can bring all manner of weapons there, and you get your kills stolen very often, and the assist stuff just doesn't quite work right a lot of the time. It's awkward, but when you land a big hit down a hallway that you just, you predicted that shot really nicely, that nothing comes close in terms of satisfaction in this game.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I apologize. My dogs are barking.
It's all good, man. Don't worry about it.
All good, dude.
All right. I kind of have a few questions. So you said kill steals.
Yeah.
Okay. So can you give me kind of an example?
Okay, sure. I full charge somebody who had just spawned, and then Chili rolls up with his stupid fucking no skill Cyclone and just takes the remaining, 21 damage. Like, that's easy.
What about Chili has dealt 50 damage to somebody, and then somebody rolls up with Thunderbolt and just one taps them?
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, you gotta charge the Thunderbolt. You gotta predict where they're going, and you gotta hit with both bolts in a lot of instances to be able to do that.
Yeah, but I mean, like, the thing is, like, kind of need to do all these things with the other weapon too. I mean, it's slightly easier.
I guess, but it's easy. It's easier, and there's not necessarily lower risk, but like a miss with those other weapons isn't as potentially dangerous or catastrophic as a miss with a Thunderbolt. Like,
yeah, no, I see what you mean. Yeah.
A lot of pilots panic and start tap firing.
Yeah.
I'm guilty of that myself. I do that a lot.
Yeah. So okay. Yeah. Well, anyway, like, I guess I'll give my thoughts on the Thunderbolt. I think it's a very powerful weapon in Team Anarchy. I think burst damage is one of the most desirable traits on a weapon. This has been something that's been a very big deal in kind of previous games that have been played competitively. Like, so I'm kind of bringing a Quake example, but the weapons in Quake, there's two weapons that come to mind: rocket launcher and railgun, both very high potential burst damage. Thunderbolt, similar thing. In Descent 1, you could straight up execute somebody on the spot with a single volley. Fully charged shot, instant kill from full health. It's a very sort of all or nothing type weapon, high risk, high reward, but you can actually end a fight before the fight even has a chance to begin properly. I think this is an incredibly powerful mechanic. I would not want a one-shot kill weapon in Overload for that reason. The thing is, one-shot weapons can even be kind of balanced within the context of games too, but they're almost never really fun to be on the receiving end of, because, again, the fight ends before it even has a chance to start. I would say, as far as the kill steals go, I think Thunderbolt is very all or nothing, and it's possible to just KO somebody incredibly quickly. Fully charged plus missile. Admittedly, not very easy to pull off. Doesn't always happen. If it does happen, you just pretty much instantly KO somebody. Come around the corner, they're gone. Like, the fight is immediately over. If somebody's lit up, even if they've taken only 20 shields of damage, if they don't have the 10% damage reduction, they are now in lethal range from a fully charged Thunderbolt. And it's very easy in Team Anarchy to just fly around with fully charged Thunderbolt. Your ship doesn't shake. You barely take any damage. The noise isn't that much of an issue as it is in a 1v1 setting. So in Team Anarchy, you can just like roll up on somebody from a blind spot and just finish them off. Like what we had was when we played a bunch of games with Luponix. So he pretty much exclusively uses Thunderbolt, and it was a very powerful synergy where, like, I would just be in dogfights and Luponix would just roll up and finish people off one by one by one. And it was really powerful. It was really consistent. It worked wonderfully. And I would say, like, again, burst damage, very, very, very good. And it can instant kill people from a huge variety of different health pools. So I think the high damage that it has is just, again, the potential with Thunderbolt is very, very high. The projectiles themselves are basically the same speed as Impulse. So the weapon overall seems to kind of excel in very similar areas as Impulse does. So in tight areas, I would say Thunderbolt is very, very powerful. And yeah, I think it's definitely better in Team Anarchy than it is in a 1v1 setting, simply because the the overcharge does not give away your position, or well, it gives away your position, but it's not as big of a deal because people are constantly busy with somebody else anyway. So yeah, I would say it's a very good weapon, and depending on the map, it honestly I think is, again, it's so all or nothing that it can kind of almost like be the best weapon in certain cases, but I don't actually think I don't think it's overpowered. I think it's in a surprisingly healthy spot. I like the way it works, and I honestly don't want this weapon to be changed. I actually think it's basically perfect.
I think in the context of utility versus potential damage, and just essentially the weapon within the current balance paradigm, that and the driller are the only two weapons. Like if I am challenged in the overload 1v1 ladder or whatever it is, because we can still supposedly set our own rules against each other, the only way I'm going to play on that ladder is if people play with a set loadout with me that is Driller, Thunderbolt, Falcon, Nova. I think those are the highest skill weapons to use in this game. Driller, 10 shots, Thunderbolt, charge action, Falcon, Nova, dumbfire missiles with, limited homing action, and you gotta lead them and whatnot. But I'm it's if we're talking game of skill, Thunderbolt is and will always be top of the pack in this game.
Yeah, I think it's definitely. I think this weapon is in a surprisingly good spot. I think it's actually, and it has a lot of potential. But Revstro, what are your thoughts on this weapon?
All right, so on the Thunderbolts, I don't have too much to add to the conversation other than, I agree. It's not very good in like a 1v1 setting. Like it excels better in like anarchies or like team anarchies because you have like some people to back you up. But in 1v1, you need a secondary weapon or primary in order to be effective with it because Thunderbolt alone is not going to cut it.
Yeah,
it gives away your position, and it's pretty loud, and it's actually like pretty easy to dodge if you're good at it. That is.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's very susceptible to, well, like 5-6 segments away, you can pretty reliably dodge it, I think. Yeah.
Even at close range, it's actually not as hard to dodge as you think.
Yeah, the evasive maneuvers are going to work really powerfully against it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
But that's kind of about it that I have to add to the Thunderbolt discussion. Like I use it myself. I enjoy using it. I get annoyed when people steal my kills with it. No. When other people steal my kills when it should have been mine.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess let's go for the ratings. Chili, what would you say where it's at?
I would put this at. Oh, geez. I'm gonna put this at a 7. It's not quite Impulse Cyclone level, but it's still pretty damn good.
All right.
Usability.
All right. Revstro, what would you say?
I'll put it at much the same level.
7 out of 10.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm honestly. I rated both Impulse and Cyclone as 7 out of 10, and I'm actually gonna rate the Thunderbolt the same. I think Thunderbolt as again, burst damage is so good that it could potentially, have a higher rating, but I think it's surprisingly difficult to use. That there are a lot of quirks to this weapon. I would say it's a solid 7 out of 10, and I think it's I just think it's a very healthy weapon. Currently, it's one of my favorites as far as design goes. Yeah. Okay, and now we get to the weird one that we don't really see that often. Lancer, the super primary.
All right, I'll go.
Yeah, sure.
So, Lancer, it's a pretty interesting one because it's the only weapon in the game you cannot start out with.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, I think it's just a worse driller because it does have like the same range as a driller, but it's a lot slower than that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we really don't see it much in like the
Tomcat.
yeah, Tomcat. Yeah, I was about to get to him.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, he's
Tomcat,
like
Gushi, and Havoc, I think, are the three big ones I can think of that use it.
yeah, Tomcat's just a god with a Lancer. Nobody can touch him with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even I have trouble with like using the Lancer.
Mm-hmm.
But it does have like some pretty decent damage. Like, isn't it like the same as the driller in some?
It should be. I believe it's 10 per beam, so it's like 20 per volley. I want to say it's
Okay.
something along those lines. Maybe a couple damage points higher or lower, but it should be in that ballpark.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. So I don't know. Like, I don't know. It's just like the Lancer is just so hard to talk about.
Yeah,
Because we don't see it much.
Yeah, honestly, I don't think Lancer is like that relevant simply because you can't spawn with it. It kind of acts as like a super weapon, and I don't actually really understand why it even got nerfed. Because again, you can't spawn with it. So I mean, if you find it, good for you. Go on a killing spree. But
Doesn't it not even spawn until you have 4 players in a match?
I don't know about that.
Or is that Devastators?
Not sure.
Oh.
But it could be the case, by all means. I think I've vaguely heard something similar, yeah, at one point. But yeah, to me, Lancer was always a super weapon. I remember I played it in the very early phases of multiplayer. It was very powerful when you found it. It seemed to be kind of the best thing to use because you could, tap it really fast and it would fire really fast. Now it's pretty good. It's very good on low ping. I mean, I play with 130, 140 ping most of the time, so Lancer for me is not that exciting. But if I find it, I occasionally use it. Yeah. I think it's okay if Lancer's better than other weapons simply because you can't spawn with it. So that's kind of where I stand on it.
Yeah. I think Lancer, I mean, I'm going to echo the, hey, it's just a worse driller sentiment. Because, I mean, it kind of is.
But,
you can't see past your own shots. Yeah, it does damage, but like, where are you even shooting? I think in a team environment, it's a good it's a good visual distraction, even if it distracts yourself, and it gets people on. Like it's an attention grabber.
Yeah.
When I see someone using Reflex, I'm gonna work them down because they might as well not be shooting. If I see someone using Lancer, like I mean, I don't know how capable they are with that weapon. If it's Tomcat, I'm gonna kill him and then just hold that Lancer as long as I can, because I know he's probably the best not PTMC pilot with the Lancer that I can think of right now.
Nice.
In an old man gaming game like we're about to have here in a couple hours, like that is a strategy. It's, essentially Lancer denial. But that's the only situation I can think of where the Lancer is a clear and present. It's because it's an unknown. I think there's some interesting. There's some interest around that. Like it's an enigma within the balance paradigm. But it's not a huge deal. It's not oppressive. It shows up now and again. It's not.
I mean, it's basically a tap fire Thunderbolt with very fast projectiles. That's kind of what it is. And I think honestly, if anything, I think the Lancer could easily be a better weapon. Actually, like it could be stronger. You can't spawn with it, so who cares? Just make it a super power up, easy.
Yeah,
good thing to fight over. But what would you guys rate it then, or what would you rate it as?
I'm gonna just say it's a either a 6 or 7.
Do you want to pick one of those? Want to pick one of those ratings? 6, 7?
I'll go with 7.
All right, gotcha. All right, Chili, what do you think?
4.
Holy shit! Really? 4 out of 10. Really?
If I'm packing a driller and I find a lancer, you know what I'm gonna use? I'm gonna use the driller. If I'm packing impulse and I find a lancer, you know what I'm gonna use? The impulse. If I find a lancer, you know what I'm gonna use? Literally any other weapon.
Yeah, it's like when
it's just, I know that's probably a function of not using it too much, and therefore I'm not great at it. But the tap fire comment was interesting. It got me thinking: who is good at tap firing the Thunderbolt? Some people. But, if you're good at tap firing the Thunderbolt, you're probably bringing the Thunderbolt a lot. You might as well stick with that. And if you're, if you panic tap fire the Thunderbolt, you know what weapon you're not going to be good with? The Lancer. It just doesn't, yeah.
Okay, so basically, when God gives you lemons, you find a new God.
Yeah.
All right.
Fuck that guy.
Wow, okay. Well, by all means, I honestly think Lancer's a solid weapon. I would say it's... I kind of I think it's a 7 out of 10. I just think it's just a good weapon. It was better on release. It got nerfed. Now it's kind of just a slightly different impulse, slightly different Thunderbolt. It's 7 out of 10 for me. Solid weapon.
Trying to change it up. Yeah.
All right, so shall we go through the secondaries real quick?
Imagine that the secondaries are not going to be
I don't think there's much to talk.
Discussion.
Yeah, there's much. Yeah. All right, Falcon.
Falcons, they're pretty solid. Well, I mean, it's good with comboing it with the Thunderbolts, because then you can potentially get a one-hit kill.
Mm-hmm.
When you fire a fully charged TB shot and Falcon at the same time.
Yeah, KO. No. Yeah, I agree. I think Falcon's just solid. I think they're considerably better on low ping. I will say this. I think when I played on EU, Falcons definitely feel very good. When I play on NA, I'd rather take the homers. But I think they're just solid. They're good weapon. It's if I see a pack, I'll pick it up. What do you think, Chili?
Falcons are good. I've had them in my starting loadout for most matches since the multiplayer beta. Much like with the driller, I'm always going to respect good Falcon play. Shoutouts to Puddles for his never miss brand.
Yeah.
I mean, they're good. They deal good damage. You just got to hit your shots because the blast radius is tiny and the splash damage is nothing. So, yeah.
So what would you rate them as far as as far as secondaries go?
I would put it at a 10. No, make it an 8.
Okay, 8 out of 10.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
I think 8 as well.
Yeah. All right, 8 out of 10. Gotcha. I'd say Falcons are kind of a 7 out of 10. I kind of think of them as the Cyclone impulse of secondaries. They're pretty solid. Better on lower ping. And just a very, very good, very nice secondary. All right, missile pods.
Ooh, missile pods. So this one, missile pods are the go-to for a lot of weapons for backup damage. Mm-hmm. In Chili's case, where he used Cyclone and the missile pods at the same time to just make as much visual clutter as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think it's pretty good with Driller too.
Gotcha.
Not much else. Home a little bit.
Yeah, light home is pretty good. What do you think about Sean? About missile pods?
I think missile pods fucking suck.
As in they're bad, or
yeah. I don't understand complaints about missile pods. What are you doing sitting there in space? What are you doing flying in a straight line? Do you know how easy it is to get out of that fucking homing? It's face roll easy. Hold a button. Just hold a button for 2 seconds and you're out of them. You gotta lead the missile pods almost they're so bad. The homing doesn't work and they don't do much damage. They're good if you have someone pinned up against a wall and you're just sort of flailing around, but they don't feel satisfying. They don't hit consistently enough. the tracking is not strong enough to work with the speed that they fly at very well. They're just awkward to use. I used them for a while in multiplayer, and then I realized that you might as well just use Falcons, because if if you hit someone who's on a wall, like if you barely miss, you're still getting decent-ish splash damage off Falcons. If you hit them directly, that's like 11 billion damage from one missile. Like, just hit your shots with the Falcons rather than trying to trust the shitty homing that the missile pods has. Not a huge fan.
Okay, gotcha. I mean, I would say, but I mean, missile pods. Yeah, they have a light homing effect. I would say missile pods are in wide open areas against competent pilots. They are pretty inconsistent. I would say because even though it's light homing, there are going to be scenarios where you cannot dodge them, and this appears to be the case in very tight areas. The kind of the side tunnels in Skybox come to mind. This is the kind of environment where missile pods can be, I would say, nearly impossible to dodge. Like you might not be able to, depending like what angle you're at when they're firing, how far away. There are definitely situations where missile pods deal very consistent damage, but it only really happens in very tight and limited areas. Yeah, I personally use them, partly because I play on high ping a lot. So I agree that they don't do all that much damage, but they are particularly good when you come up on somebody from behind who's kind of preoccupied with someone else, and then it feels like you can get quite a lot of damage in. However, if you engage somebody, you're dogfighting, then yeah, they will not hit very consistently. So I would say situational, but potentially really quite powerful, because you get a fair bit of potential damage when you spawn with them. So there. What would you rate them as, guys?
I'd say a 6.
6 out of 10. Gotcha.
I'm gonna put them at a 6 as well. I mean, I think they do have some usage. I mean, they're good missiles to have. It's better than not having missiles. But in hallways and stuff, you can people hear that lock and they try and break it. You can stealth Falcons to them in the middle of a lot of primary fire and get damage that way instead of wasting missile pods and forcing them out of the tunnel.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah.
So,
yeah. I would put them honestly as, again, 7 out of 10. I think they are. I think Falcons are kind of better on low ping. Missile pods kind of better on high ping. Yeah, I think they're just solid. Honestly, nothing amazing, but nothing really too terrible either. Yeah. All right, but now we get to the more controversial stuff. The lovely red hunters.
Oh yeah. This is like one of the only missiles that got a substantial nerf.
Oh yeah.
Mod.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But this one, I actually do have quite a bit to say.
Oh, by all means.
So, in the beginning, if we were doing this podcast before the hunter nerfs, I would have said this would be a 10 out of 10 missile. There's no reason to not to bring hunters to a game. Because it's just that good.
Yeah.
But now with the slower hunter nerfs and the tracking is toned down a bit, it's a lot more fair to deal with. You don't just get battered with them by every single angle, and they're a lot easier to dodge. But I've also found a certain other utility for hunters and missile pods to an extent is that in a certain situation when you're trying to confront someone in a big room and you're coming from a small hallway, you can shoot hunters, and if they track into a certain direction, where they are in the room.
Yes.
It's especially helpful using that tactic with the Thunderbolt, so you know where to shoot.
You can kind of bait them in or funnel them in a certain direction.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yes. Yeah, makes sense. So would you say they're, in a pretty healthy place right now, or would you say they're still kind of on a stronger side of things?
Yeah, they're in a much more healthier spot than before the nerf.
Gotcha. Yeah. But yeah, very nice. Shall we take the rating immediately? What would you say they're at currently?
I'd say the hunters are at an 8 out of 10.
Gotcha. All right. Cool. Chili, what do you think?
I think pre-nerf 12 out of 10, post-nerf 10 out of 10.
Oh, really? 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay.
I think everybody but me is still using the old hunters. Personally, mine don't track well. They do good damage, but like they track as bad as missile pods sometimes. It pisses me off. I get so mad. But no, yeah, like there was a while there, a long while, and in some cases it's still true, where if you didn't bring hunters to a match, you were an active detriment to your team. Like they're that good.
Yeah.
We all kind of like they're in a good enough spot now where they can miss, but like if you don't have them, that's a pretty significant tool to be missing from your belt. You know?
Yeah.
And like they do 12 damage a pop, right? Something like that, maybe more. I don't even know what the number is.
They do pretty substantial, yeah. It's pretty good. Yeah.
That's good. Like if you shoot them at an unwitting enemy, the lock doesn't show up until the lock sound doesn't play until they're very close. Just because of their travel speed. If you're engaging two enemies at once, sometimes you get the split action that everybody likes, which I think is just man, I love that.
Yeah, it looks very cool. I agree.
That's definitely fun as hell.
Definitely some eye candy going on.
Yeah. And they're easy to hide in other weapons. Like hunters are coming at some point. I assume in every engagement I'm going to be facing off against like a set or more of hunters. But yeah, like you can hide them in a lot of primaries, especially like a Cyclone or Flak even, because they track well enough that at the very edge of Flak's range, when you launch them, if the other player is not like full tricord dodging and doing nothing else, you're probably going to get some damage off on them.
Yeah, I can see that.
There was a while there where the Super Hunters was more valuable than Super Devastators simply because you could kill everybody several times over instead of once over. Yeah, they're good. I agree with Revstro that they're in a much, much better spot than they were. I wouldn't want to see them nerf too much harder though, because boy, is it annoying to miss with the hunters. And there's an expectation that the tracking actually works because they're bigger, heavier missiles than the missile pods.
Yeah, they could have dedicated homers too. So
yeah, like that's the role that they fill. It's not screening. It's like point damage.
Yeah,
you know what I mean, like it's that. Like it's the one big hit of hunters.
Yeah, I would say the hunters are in a much healthier spot too. Right now, hunters, to me, I think they're still a very solid pick to take into a game. I think there are very specific scenarios actually where you kind of maybe want something else over hunters, so I think they're still very valid and viable. I think, like you said, they are very good when you fire them, from behind on an unsuspecting opponent. I think my interaction with it is you can now dodge the hunters pretty consistently, but I find myself taking some splash damage very often.
Yeah.
So it still deals some damage, but it, you don't take the direct like punch to the face. So I still think for that reason alone that they're still pretty consistent. They're still very solid and they're very good when shooting people from behind. So yeah, all in all, I think they're a very solid missile. And in a dogfight, sort of a face-to-face battle, you can dodge them. And they feel quite healthy. I think it's about as good as it's going to get. We only get 2 when we spawn, and I think it's fair. They don't work that well, from very long ranges, so because people can just kind of turn the corner and then it's instantly nullified. So yeah, I think they're good. They're actually in a pretty healthy spot. So I would actually say that I agree. I think this is the one time where I give the same rating as Revstro. I think they are an 8 out of 10. I think they are more consistent than missile pods, and for that reason alone, I think they are slightly better. Even though you spawn only with 2.
Yeah.
Okay, now we get to the creepy boys.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, these are like the most controversial secondaries.
Yeah.
But you go first, Chili.
Oh yeah. Okay. All right. So creepers have been problematic since day one of the multiplayer beta. Like they're desyncing all over the place. They're high damage. They seal off areas for large amounts of time, like entire rooms even. Forget hallways. They're wild. They're crazy.
Yeah, error denial basically. Yeah.
In sort of an antithesis to always respecting Driller and Thunderbolt play, I will almost never respect Creeper play.
Really?
Maybe this is a function of hunters being nerfed in recent months, but I can't stand dying to creepers anymore. Something about it is just ridiculous. There was a while there where it's like, oh, you've got creepers. Okay, I took some desync damage, but everybody deals with desync creepers in this game, so like whatever. But they found so much utility now that they're sort of filling a role that hunters did for a while, which is free damage. People are latching on to, oh, the creepers desync. Nobody knows where these actually are. I'm going to just put these in an area, and if they hit shit, well, then that's awesome. I think a simple damage nerf to these of probably a point, maybe even as much as a point and a quarter. I think they do 6 right now.
Wait, creepers?
Yeah.
Creepers deal, I believe, like 6 damage per creeper?
Yeah.
No, they deal more like 16 damage per creeper or 18 damage. They're very powerful.
Whatever it is, I'm just looking at the OL mod get data, that text file that exports, that has something, that has a value in it.
Wait, 6 damage per creeper? Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, then I got it all wrong. Sorry, but I guess it must be way lower.
No, okay. I've also found that turning down the speed of creepers by about 10 to 15% solves a significant amount of the desync. It doesn't solve it entirely. I don't think that's a fixable issue, but it's better than it currently is without too much of a change in how they actually function and perform. But that's not really here nor there. I like the role that they fill. I like that they're a more active choice than just slapping down some proxy mines like in D1. I think proxy mines there are kind of boring, even if they make for some interesting moments where, like, you know, you accidentally fly near them after the 30-second timer runs out and they explode. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I could see creepers being in a very good spot very easily. But
what would you rate them as?
That's a good question. I mean, I would probably put them down at like an 8 because they're not universally usable. But if you throw down a set of them in white in Vault, like that room there, you're like, that is a challenge. Like that is a challenge for pilots to evade or get out from or something like that.
Okay.
I found, like it's. Yeah, they're in kind of a weird spot. If you die with a half set of creepers in your inventory, like that's 6 that you spawn with. Mm-hmm. There's a significant chance that you're dropping a full 12 set on your body when you die, which I think is just kind of strange. Not to say your teammates could necessarily farm your body for more creepers, but
they can.
Anybody could farm your body for more creepers in that instance and shoot them off. So it's. Yeah, I don't know. I think there's a lot of toxicity around them right now, and I think it's because we've lost sight of the fact that anybody can throw up that weird desync nonsense. And if everybody can do that, then it's not too far removed from anybody throwing out an immediate like 30-some damage off a single hunter set because the tracking is just so insane.
Interesting.
How that gets done is different between the two weapons just because their mechanics are different, but the feeling in the game is somewhat the same.
Okay. I want to say the 6 damage you saw, it must be the creeper count that you spawn in. There's no way creepers deal 6 damage, I'm pretty sure.
It might be on contact and then it deals splash on top of that. I don't know exactly how this works. Apparently there's like some crazy
okay. Okay. It's just I just want to point out something. So you actually rated Hunters as a 10 out of 10, but you rated Creepers as an 8 out of 10. It kind of sounded like you wanted Creepers to be tweaked, but I didn't really want Hunters to be tweaked.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. Do you like consider them overpowered, or I'm kind of a little confused about that?
I mean, it depends on the map. Try hard. They make me want to just leave the game.
Yeah, I've been thinking about reworking that. Yeah.
But hieroglyphic, like, it doesn't matter. Throw as many creepers as you want at me. That I don't care.
Fair enough.
Skybox, kind of the same depending on what part of the hallways I'm in. You know?
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're more situational. Hunters are always going to be good on any map. Creepers, I mean, there's ways out of those. So.
Gotcha. All right. Let's. I kind of want to let Revstro get in. I think he kind of wanted to.
Okay, so creepers. I'm gonna say this outright. They are fucking stupid.
Hold on, let me get that down. All right, gotcha. Yeah.
I hate their desync so much. They just take away the entire fun out of this game. If it were up to me, I just remove their homing capabilities and either have them just like drift slowly in the direction they were fired, or just have them stay put. Because the homing is just so unreliable that, like, even for like the shooter, it's sometimes unreliable.
Mm-hmm.
But I just like I do get your I do agree with you, Chili, on that on bigger maps it's not much of a problem, but on smaller maps, if you bring creepers to a small map, you're just an asshole. I'm sorry, you're just an asshole.
Yeah.
Yep.
What would you rate them as?
I'd say 9.
9
Just because of their desync. If they didn't desync, it'd be a lot lower.
Okay, so this is, I think, the first instance where I'm gonna I think go in the opposite direction and say creepers are like the weird weapon that doesn't annoy me at all. Like, to me, creepers feel like a dead weapon most of the time. I don't like using them because I don't really expect them to work. The weird thing is when I do end up using them, they oftentimes kind of do work, which is really counterintuitive for me because whenever I see somebody fire creepers, I just immediately leave the room. Like, it's not even I'm not even gonna bother trying to fly through it. I'm not gonna try any fancy shit. I'm just gonna, float the fuck away. And creepers are never a problem. They have very high potential burst damage when somebody sneaks up on you and just unloads them in point blank. By all means, they're very powerful. Area denial, absolutely, but they're so slow. You could just fly away. Obviously, the occasional desync where you cannot actually see creepers on your screen and they're still there. Yeah, sure, that's kind of frustrating. But the weird thing is, creepers don't actually frustrate me or annoy me that much. I think they're kind of powerful potentially, but I think against competent pilots, they just don't really work. Like, I don't really expect anything from creepers against people that know how to fly. So to me, they're just they're a weapon that's good on a tight map. They obviously work, but I never expect them to work. That's the weird thing. They just kind of end up doing something, and I'm kind of happy when they do. But yeah, I don't pretty much never bring them in my loadout. Mm-hmm. It's just something that I don't feel like I can rely on these. So yeah,
I feel the same way about bringing creepers into your loadouts. I think because you spawn with so little creepers, it's just better to just switch it for something else, like Falcons, for example.
Yeah, Falcon's pretty consistent, right? You can, even if you splash, you still do 6-7 damage. It's still nice to have. Every little bit helps. Yeah, I would say they're a 7 out of 10 in my book. Obviously, I know on Tryhard, Tryhard has the unintentional side effect of just making secondaries more powerful in general, which I don't really like that much. But yeah, other than that, I don't really have a problem with them. Yeah, okay.
I think part of the utility of creepers is the desync in and of itself. You can, because their location is so hidden, the area denial aspect is so much more powerful. And I think it's good to have an area denial secondary. We don't have one outside of the creepers, essentially.
Yeah.
But
it's just one of those things where I feel like I have this huge disconnect with the rest of the community, because I totally agree with you. A lot of people have a problem with creepers. They do not like the desync. And it's so weird that it almost feels like I'm alone in this world. I just don't have a problem with them. but everybody else seems to have the problem. So the problem is probably with me. So but yeah, it's by all means. If creepers get nerfed, I honestly don't really care because I don't really use them anyway. So it's like whatever. Yeah. Okay, now we get to the probably everybody's favorite secondary, the Nova.
Woo! Oh yeah, the Novas.
I personally love the Novas. I think they are just a wonderful secondary, very fair, very fun, look sexy, green, perfect. I like them.
Yeah.
I think they're, go on.
They make good Twitch clips, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. What do you think, Revstro? Like, do you think the weapon is in a good spot?
Oh yeah, it's definitely in a good spot. Though I'll say that the blobs, I think, could track a little better.
They desync if they do, but yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty inconsistent with the blobs.
Yeah, the blob, it definitely feels in terms of power level, it feels like a solid step down from the Descent 1 smarts, to me at least.
Yeah.
Like those things track way better, but I think that's perfectly fine. Like I'm perfectly okay with there being a secondary that it's an instant kill on direct hit, but the blobs not that big of a deal. Yeah, I think this is it's Novas. I think are just so good. It's just perfect and in a super healthy spot. But that's just
they're still a high skill weapon like from D1, but you think of the D1 smarts and that is Descent is a much more exacting game because it is peer-to-peer, and the connections are often so much more stable with much rock-solid netcode. It's not perfect, but it's leagues better than Overload in a lot of senses. So that even though Novas are a little more inexact here, because the projectiles are so huge, it's great. I think the Nova's in a great spot. It rewards, getting the full connect, hitting someone dead on with a missile is an instant kill as it should be. If you hit a wall, you can still get splash damage off the blobs and potentially get a kill that way. And if you miss outright, well, hit your shots next time, buddy.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Sorry, by all means. What would you guys rate it, or what would you rate it as? Where would you put it on the 10-point scale?
10.
Really nice. Very nice. Shirley, where would you put it?
I would put that at an 8. Yeah, we'll throw it at an 8 there. Yeah.
Damn, nearly had consensus. Yeah. I would put it as an 8 also. I just think it's a very solid, very fair, not super powerful, but still a perfectly serviceable missile. I think it's good. So it's 8, 8, and 10. All right. Well, now we get to the the missile of ultimate despair. The one that devastates us all, the Devastator.
I mean, what is there to say about the Devastator? It nearly instant kills everything in its blast radius.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure you all remember the new improved Falcon clip. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Getting the full player kill.
Yep. A classic.
Yeah, it's I mean, I would say Devastator. Honestly, I like it as a superpower. I don't think this is really anywhere near the same level as pretty much the rest of the missile roster, if you will. I think it's just so much better. In CQB, it's basically a guaranteed kill. If you try to do a long range Devastator, could be because you're low shields, then yeah, sure, you might kind of whiff it, but going for the surefire thing, it's pretty much always going to devastate somebody. So yeah, I think
also about the Devastator. Has anyone seen that glitch? Where it detonates prematurely on the shooter's ship.
Yep.
Is that still happening? Oh my god, it is.
Yep.
Yeah, there's some wonkiness going on with it. Yeah. And there's also situations where you cannot detonate it manually. I think I'm guessing because that kind of happens on server side, and then the player that fires it doesn't see it, so yeah, they can't detonate it. So you get there's some wonkiness going on. What would you guys? I'm guessing, Chili. What do you think about that? You have some.
Yeah. I've got a few thoughts on it. I'm on the fence about it being a super power up. I think if you dial down the number of Devastators on a map, that's good enough. It's a good spice to have in the mix there. Like, I don't think anybody should be looking at Overload as a strict competitive environment. I think to do so is not necessarily a disservice to the game or contrary to its design, but it's just not something that Overload is capable of delivering on. And having Devastators in the mix kind of reinforces that. The fact that they can just drop in a regular Anarchy or Team Anarchy is, I mean, that's just part of the game. They're always useful. They might be a little bit like overpowered in their current state. I've been toying with the idea of having them explode to a radius similar to Megas from D1. If y'all are familiar with that, I would say the radius would be 2 to 2.5 times its current. But then I also turned down the damage that the bomblets do, so that even if you shoot someone, and catch them in quote unquote the blast, if you turn the travel time on the bomblets down and their damage down, but make them last longer so they have the larger radius, you would only catch them with a chunk of damage instead of like instant killing. I think there could be some fun to be had with that in the mix as like as a regularly dropping missile as opposed to the instant kill that it is now. It feels cheese as fuck to get a kill with a Devastator. It feels awesome as fuck to kill someone with a Devastator. I think it's in a great spot and a shitty spot at the same time. It's a 10 out of 10 in terms of my rating scale, which is usefulness. You can never it's never bad to have a Devastator in your pocket. It's never bad in a team game to miss with a Devastator because better you miss than someone else on the other team hit you with it.
Yeah.
I think it's fine. I think Devastators are fine. It's you win some, you lose some, easy come, easy go. That's Devastators for me. Like, whatever.
Yeah, I do agree that Devastators kind of serve as a reminder that this isn't a competitive esport at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I mean, I always kind of sort of think in that direction. At least on some level, I'm kind of a competitive person, but yeah, I think kind of having it as a superpower is I think good in that sense that you will have a map objective that people will want to fight over, because you have potentially 2 kills there or even more. But yeah, I'm honestly perfectly fine with Devastators just kind of spawning in. I know there are more competitive elements in the community that don't want to see Devastators at all, but I think it is kind of it's kind of a fun weapon at the end of the day. I think it's particularly funny when people start dying with a Devastator and then it starts getting juggled between people and nobody kind of gets the shot off. I think it's just like a fun little frantic thing that can happen. Others would probably again, I don't know where everybody stands on this, but there are definitely those that don't really enjoy the Devastator mechanics. So whatever, I think it's kind of cool. I think in a Team Anarchy where the kill throughput is like 200 per team anyway, then getting like 5 or 6 kills with a Devastator isn't really that big of a deal. Yeah, sure, you might think it's low skill or whatever, but it's a relatively minuscule percentage of the whole kill count. So
where it's bullshit is in duos, where you meet the 4-player requirement in a match for Devastators to spawn to begin with, and then one of those can turn the tide or even be the deciding factor between 2 teams, and that's where it's bullshit. Wider anarchies and bigger TAs, not so.
I kind of agree that I don't think Devastators are really that huge of a problem.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think in terms of power level, I would, I think it is the strongest missile in the game. This is the one thing I would rate as 10 out of 10. I think it's basically a guaranteed kill if you play your cards right. What you guys rate it as?
10.
All right,
that's a 10.
That's 10. What about you, Chili?
Yeah, that's a 10.
All right, gotcha. Nice. Okay, so Devastators are on the same level.
Unanimous consent. It's the best.
Fun fact: Devastators are the same level as Hunters for you. Boom. Very nice.
Never a bad thing to have them in your pocket.
Yeah, I agree. I think Devastators are they're just good missile. Okay, so now we get to another interesting one, Time Bomb.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one is like sort of my favorite one.
Oh, very nice.
Like they're about as like the same level on Novas for me, like in terms of favoritism.
Mm-hmm.
But the Time Bomb is definitely weaker than the Novas for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Because of its slow travel, like like you can get some decent kills with a time bomb, but it's a lot harder to use than the Novas, for example.
Yeah.
Like it all comes down to like the netcode and ping, and whether or not you get a time bomb kill or not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But the blast damage, yeah, that can get pretty obnoxious. Like, I think in like one game, I remember I was at like 60 or so armor, and then after from a blast of the time bomb, I was down to like 10 or 8.
Yeah.
It gets pretty obnoxious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something is up with the blast radius of the time bomb, because like the time bomb goes off, and it sets up that the radius itself, and the way I think most gamers think of a blast radius in a game is a linear, decrease in damage the further you get from the thing itself. And some games have it where it's like an exponential decrease, so it's like really intense around the thing, and then it very rapidly falls off, but it's a wide radius. I think time bombs have it like you have the explosion, you have a very wide kill radius where it does 100 damage around it, and then it really, really quickly falls off for a very, very short radius around that to basically nothing, and then you're out of it.
This kind of makes me think, could it be that the time bomb has sort of a similar thing going on, maybe that the creepers do, where the time bomb kind of desyncs? So you're not actually, you don't see the time bomb where it really is, so that's also could be why judging the AoE is very inconsistent, because I could have sworn I've had situations where the time bomb blows up really close to my ship and I'm taking 20, maybe 30 damage. It feels kind of weird.
Yeah, it's all because the TB has some light homing capabilities.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very similar to the creeper. Yeah,
I think disabling the homing on the time bomb would be a minor enough change that would make it a little bit more consistent, maybe turn the fuse timer up and the damage up a little bit to compensate and keep it sort of in its current spot in the meta. I don't know what kind of numbers we're looking at here. I'm just sort of, fielding ideas.
I wouldn't mind it, to be honest.
Yeah, I think ultimately the time bomb's in a great spot. Again, not a weapon that you're going to be looking away from to not use. Getting back to earlier comments about the creepers, this is the only other weapon I would say that does the area denial well. I mean, if you shoot the timer, the other team or everybody else in that match is thinking, leave the scene, get out.
Absolutely.
So there's a bit of timing and finesse that's needed to get good damage and kills off with the time bomb, be it playing chicken with someone and rushing right at them as they're rushing at you, and then you just sort of loose the time bomb in their face as you're flying by and that kind of thing, or have your teammates or other people in an anarchy be essentially occupying a lot of people at once, and you just fling it and you hope the fight lasts through the entire fuse time of the timer itself.
I kind of I tend to agree with that. I mean, time bomb to me, I think is I'm basically rated on the same level as Nova. I think the most fun thing is to there's this massive dogfight going on, a huge furball, 5 people in a single room, and you just fire the time bomb and you just fly away, and you just hear the thump and the kill feed lights up. It's fuck yeah. Got 2 or 3 guys. It's just it has this weird sort of satisfying moment, because the time bomb also kind of slows down, and it flies up pretty quickly out of the ship, and then it slows down in the middle of everybody, and it's just boom, everyone's gone. The fight's over.
It's like a fair Devastator. Everyone hears it launch. Everyone knows it's coming. Yeah. There's time to dodge it. And if you die to it, you're fucking shit. But it's not fucking shit, hit Alt F4. It's just God fucking damn it.
Yeah, but I love it. I think it's awesome, and I like how it kind of slows the game for half a second. But it's I think it's very fair. I think it's kind of on the same boat as Nova in terms of your power level. What would you guys rate it as?
I think I'm gonna rate it at maybe a 7.
Gotcha. Chili.
That's an 8.
Nice. Yeah, we're very close. 2 8s and a 7. Now we get the final weapon of the night. The Vortex missile.
Oh, yeah.
I have quite a few thoughts about this weapon, but what do you guys think?
Vortexes are underrated, in my opinion.
Interesting.
I think if you play your cards right with the Vortex, they are super effective. Like, because they can bounce off of like walls and shit, you can like easily get like some decent amount of damage. That is if like they're close to like the blast of the Vortex. Because it is pretty hard to like get a direct hit with the Vortexes, but when you do get one, you deal a lot of damage.
Yeah.
But other than that, if it's just like in the blast radius, like the damage is just negligible at best.
You sure about that?
Well, yeah, from personal experience.
Oh, okay. Because I always kind of thought that even the blast dealt some pretty decent damage. Or what do you mean by let's just? I'm kind of want to ask, curious about the like some hard number. Like, what would you consider negligible in terms of blast damage?
Well, like 10 armor or like 10 to 15. That's pretty negligible in my opinion.
All right. Okay, fair enough. All right, cool. Yeah, Chili, what do you think?
Vortexes. I see Vortexes as almost a high skill Falcon.
High skill Falcon.
The bank shot is fun as hell to pull off. They do high damage, but not stupefyingly lethal damage. I think it's like 40 or 50 on a direct hit, which I think is fair because they travel slow. They bounce at weird angles if you miss. So unless you're like point blank or they're rushing you in like a weird angle or something like that, you're not going to be getting too much Vortex damage off. I don't see too much Vortex damage in games. I don't worry too much about Vortexes when they're being fired at me. But if I catch a hit, that's a fair hit. I think the travel time is it's a fair weapon. I'd like to see a tad more of them in multiplayer games, just in terms of like spawning and using them. Because I don't think they're that oppressive. Maybe if there were more of them, I'd have a different opinion. But as of right now, I don't know.
Very nice.
Yeah, they're kind of like Reflex, but they just don't go as far, and they deal a lot more damage. I don't give them much thought unless I'm using them, and if I have them, they're still the first missiles I'm using because you don't spawn with them.
Oh, yeah. No, this is perfect. I love it. You know why? Because Vortex missiles are in my book the second best missile in the game. I love it that you guys are kind of lukewarm on Vortex, because I actually think Vortex they're basically mini Devastators. I think they are really, really good. They're super consistent. Like the range they fly, I think they have about like 5 or 6 segments. They blow up at the perfect range. If you get the splash close, I think you can deal up to like 30 to even 40 damage with splash and like 50 with a direct hit or 45-ish. And like it almost always feels like if I get an engagement where I have 2 warts, I'm going to get a lot of damage with the warts and I can probably finish the target. It's interesting because Luponix and I, we had this conversation where we played a few 1v1s and the Vortex missiles were so good. Like almost, if one of us had warts, that's the person that won the fight. Like pretty much without exception. I think these are really, really nice missiles. I agree with Vortex, or not Vortex. I agree with Revstro that they're kind of underrated. I think they're super nice. Like when I see them, I always go for them. You fire 2 of those into a dogfight. You hit a couple of people, and even if you hit them for like 15 to 20 damage, that's 15 to 20 damage times 2. That's a lot of damage. That's just it doesn't kill, but you definitely feel it. Vortex missiles, I absolutely like. I think they're very nice, very consistent. Like that's the thing with them; they're really consistent. To me, they're kind of like the crusher of missiles. in that sense. So yeah, I definitely like them. But yeah, yeah. This is the one missile I would rate as a 9 out of 10. Actually, what do you guys? What would you guys put it on?
8.
Gotcha. That's still pretty strong.
Kind of on the fence with this one. I'm gonna put him at a. I'll put him at a 6 actually. I think their range and their speed makes them awkward to use. The damage is good if you can get the hit. But I find myself very often, if I'm holding them, trying to get myself in a position to use them effectively, and that makes me miss out, I feel, on being able to capitalize on other situations that I would have been able to take had I not been thinking so hard about trying to use the vortexes.
Oh, I see. Okay. So
like
they kind of
they demand, because you don't spawn with them, and because they're such a rarity, and because they're good enough, they demand usage and they demand being in situations to dump them.
Right. I see.
But like getting there, like it often puts you in a compromising position.
That's pretty interesting. Yeah, I mean, it kind of screws with your game plan. In other words,
a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like they're still good to have, but like I gotta be. Yeah, I gotta be in other situations to use them. Boy, that didn't make any sense at all.
No, I
super caffeinated or not caffeinated?
No, actually, this I felt like it. Yeah, I mean, I can understand why you don't like them that much, because they, you know.
I like them. I just don't find them particularly usable in a way that I want to use them. You know.
Yeah, kind of forces you to sort of deviate from your plan, I guess.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys. Wow, we got through all of them, and it took us exactly 2 hours and 43 minutes. Oh my! But that was I think that was actually quite interesting. I think I really enjoyed it. Like, how are you guys feeling?
Oh yeah, I like this. I like this a lot. Pretty fun.
Yeah, same. So I'm super pumped. Like I love this kind of back and forth and discussing these things because I really like that, you know, we didn't actually agree on everything. So it was quite interesting to see like how we kind of deviate in our thinking. But yeah, awesome. I think that's it. I think I'm going to cut the recording right